Open it and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rock on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my time.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here tonight on the big program. Lots of things to talk about, lots of things to go over. I mean, it has been an interesting weekend. The press club correspondence dinner. Anybody watch the speeches? I did. Tells you how boring my life can be. Interesting responses from the conservatives. These correspondence dinners, they're basically just a chance for the president and for the people up on the dais to really bust stones and to go after, just supposedly all in good fun, and to kind of go after each other and kind of bust each other's shoes. It's for the president to go after the press corps. It just is what it is. So they take their little childish shots, and it is exactly what that is. You know that going into it. If you've got a bruisable ego, stay home. That's about it. If your ego is that light, probably best to just stay home. So when you hear the Ben Steins of the world say, "Oh, it was mean-spirited. It was so mean-spirited. It was bad. It was mean-spirited, and it just did all of those things." I look at it and I go, I don't think it was mean-spirited. It just is the game that was. Anyway, for me over the weekend, it was opening day, the beginning of my son's baseball season, and one of those just amazing opportunities, those amazing times in life where you go, this is what it's really all about. That's the great thing as far as I'm concerned. But tonight on the program, lots of things to get to, lots of things to talk about. Let's go to the final phone line, see who we've got on line one. How you doing tonight? What's on your mind? And he hung up. There you go. See, that was quick. Had a really snappy comeback. I'll bet you he did. He had something. Oh, get him, and I'll zing him, and then forgot. Just didn't know. It just left the mind. And I love those. You go to the phone lines and you go, "Hey, are you there?" No, because well, I guess that's better than "Did I win?" Anyway, but I look at the weekend, and I hope you had a good weekend in the beginning of this week. I go and I think of those days when I was a kid, and it was one of these things I was thinking about over the weekend, that I didn't have a father growing up. My mother got pregnant young, and the person who was my sperm donor, in fact, I don't even know his name. In fact, my grandmother wants to tell me in the worst way before she dies, and I just have no interest in knowing. And, I know some people, they want to know all the details. I don't. In the past, let it go. But this weekend is one of those moments where you go back and you go, wow, I look at my son, who I am just the luckiest guy in the world to have three just amazing children and a wife who has done an amazing job raising them. And I look at my son who looks at me with these eyes of adornment, that just this, you're the greatest thing in the whole world, and something I've never felt. And I guess, there's part of me that, and my wife and I was talking about this, I don't live on a roller coaster. I don't have real highs and I don't have real lows. I live my life pretty much in the middle because I'm fairly pragmatic about everything. People say, well, you're a pessimist. No, I'm a realist. I look at things as they are, not as I want them to be or not as I hope they're never going to be. I look at them as they are. Things are what they are. So I don't have these huge roller coasters. So I've never had these really, really big highs. And I look at my son, and he just turned 8, and I look at him and I go, wow, there's this kid who just adores everything that I say and I do, and it's just it's just an amazing experience. And over the weekend is one of those moments where I kind of felt cheated. And I never have before because, by not having a father, I always learned how to do things on my own. So I think I got maybe a better understanding of how things actually work other than someone telling me, well, this is how you do it and just walking through steps. I'm not sure. But, I look at this and I go, this is the first time that I've kind of felt, I was cheated out of these moments. Because, I played Little League Baseball. I played football, and I did all of these things. There was rarely anybody there cheering for me except for the other people. But, I look at it and I go, I'm just lucky. And I wonder if other people feel that way or if other people realize that we really are very lucky, or I am very fortunate in everything that I've been able to do. And everything that I've been able to accomplish. And I hope other people feel that way. And part of me says, it's a lot of the combination of a bunch of things. It's the combination of the opportunities that I've had, the hard work that I've done, the decisions that I've made, and oh, by the way, that hard work that I did, that dedication, I was actually paid a reasonable wage because of a contract. And to me, I go back to all of those fortunate things and link it to the fact that, and my wife and I were talking about this the other day, that, in our marriage, we have never had one dispute, one cross moment, one argument about money. Never once. It's never been an issue. We've always made enough money to pay our bills, to have a couple of dollars to put aside. And when we put enough aside, we go on vacations or do whatever. We both have the same mentality when it comes to money, but we've also never not had enough. And I think that's hugely important. So when I hear my conservative friends talk about, oh, I believe in family values, and family values is whatever you believe it is, this, that, or the other thing. To me, the number one family value is making sure there's enough money in the household so that the first argument you have in the morning is not, you spent what? You bought food. To me, that's a family value. So I rarely share this kind of stuff. My personal mental hang-ups about some stuff like this, I rarely do. But it was just one of those overpowering feelings I had, and I'm sure maybe you've had them as well. That at some point looking backwards, that I just missed out on something, and maybe it would have changed me, maybe it wouldn't have. I don't know. But it was just one of those things that I looked at my son, and and I have for a while, who's just whatever. He's just totally one of these things that I've never felt. And every time he sees me, I get this huge hug and a big I love you and I miss you and all of that stuff that I've never as a kid felt. And I guess I'm just fortunate, and I hope everyone else is as well. I'm not sure how that plays into opening day, but that's just kind of my thought. And we lost, for those who need to know. We lost, and in pretty 10 to 6, I think it was, pretty big fashion. Got to make that throw from second to first. Got to do that a little bit better. Anyway, tonight on the program, again, I'm going to talk a little bit about the gubernatorial race. I'm going to have former gubernatorial candidate and EPA head here in Pennsylvania, John Hanger, on the program. Talk a little bit about who he is endorsing in the May 20th primary, and I hope everyone gets out to vote on May 20th, because I don't want to be here on the 21st going, well, it was poor turnout. We got about 15% of the people who bothered to go and cast their ballot. No, I would love to say, 70% of the people came out, and the guy we got on either side of the ticket or on either side is the one people want. Because that's how we take all of this stuff back. That's how we move the country forward and get out of this gridlock and all of this nonsense, by making sure that actual decent candidates responsive to we the people are the ones who are on the ballot come November, and the ones that sit in the halls of power come January. For me, economics, for me, the jobs, huge. And if you look at from my perspective in the gubernatorial race anyway, you look at the last 3.5 years, our governor has not done a stellar job on the jobs front. Division, divisiveness, oh yeah, done a great job. Fabulous. Not so well on the jobs front. And to me, that's one of the big issues. Anyway, gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. I'm the talk.
The Rick Smith Show.
This Mother's Day, don't settle for the same old box of chocolates. Give Mom a gift she'll really appreciate. A gift that'll truly make a difference. Give her a heart necklace made by women who have survived actual war in South Sudan. These necklaces contain Swarovski crystals and are simply stunning. They come in all different colors and sizes, and best of all, they help fund a great cause. It's what Mom would want. To purchase your gift, visit goatsfortheoldgoat.com and click on Shop. Again, that's goatsfortheoldgoat.com/shop.
Hey there, fellow working class heroes. I have some great news. You can now get the Rick Smith Show podcast on your iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, or Palm on demand and on the go. Get your class war to go by downloading the Stitcher app on your smartphone by going to Stitcher.com and search for The Rick Smith Show, or go to our website at thericksmithshow.com and click on our Stitcher button. Together we can, and we will, rebuild a prosperous working class and leave opportunity for our children.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
There are many employers that say, we're looking for people, but we can't find anybody that has passed the drug test, a lot of them. And that's a concern for me, because we're having a serious problem with that.
I messed up my entire life because I got high. I lost my kids and wife because I got high. Say what, say what, say what, say what. Now I'm sleeping on the sidewalk and I know why. Why, man? Yeah, because I got high. Because I got high.
That's at least that's what Tom Corbett thinks. And again, you go back to first when he was candidate Corbett, it was all about the lazy. All the unemployed are just lazy. Their jobs out there, just too lazy to go do it. Then he becomes governor. Oh well, they're all drug addicts now because couldn't use the lazy argument anymore. Sad. And you wonder why he is the most vulnerable governor in the country right now. Followed second by the guy down in Florida, this Rick Scott, who last poll by Quinnipiac has the incumbent Governor Scott trailing the former Governor Christ by 10 points. Interestingly enough, though, just like here in Pennsylvania, a majority don't think Scott deserves a second term. So we'll see. And a big part of it is the Obamacare. Scott actually took the Medicaid expansion. Our guy, not so much. So I'm interested to see where the polling is going to come from, and well, what happens come May 20th. And speaking of May 20th, John Hanger, former gubernatorial candidate, also former EPA head here in Pennsylvania, just came out and I guess sort of an endorsement. We'll ask him. I got John Hanger on the line. John, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure.
So this is an endorsement?
An enthusiastic, strong endorsement for Tom Wolf.
Why?
Absolutely. Because I think the public is right to judge Tom as a unique, special leader. We are so used to leaders in all walks of life feathering their own nests, grabbing golden parachutes, using their power for their own well-being, that Tom stands out. In big ways and small ways, Tom has proven that he cares about regular people, his customers, his workers, and he's actually put the well-being of others ahead of himself. And I think that's why Tom has surged to the top of the pack.
And he's run really an outstanding campaign in my view. I mean, I look at some of the campaigns and you go, are you running? Did I miss something?
Yeah, that's true. And Tom is a progressive. He calls himself a progressive, and not all the other candidates actually so describe themselves. He's taken, I think, good, strong, progressive positions on most issues. He also, I think, has an opportunity to be a true transformational governor. By that I mean not business as usual. We need a Democrat who will transform the state. And Tom Wolf has the potential of doing that.
And maybe not just someone who's going to stop the insanity, because I think you got to have a Democratic governor come November, because maybe some of the craziness stops, some of the fringe things get off the table, and we start talking about what both sides should be committed to, which is jobs, our economy, educating our children, those things.
Absolutely. With Tom Wolf as our governor, we would have a real shot at raising the minimum wage. With Tom Wolf as our governor, I think we will expand Medicaid and bring insurance to another 500 to 700,000 families.
But on the minimum wage and the Medicaid expansion, aren't all four remaining gubernatorial candidates in favor of that?
They are, and I'm not here to criticize any of the other Democratic candidates. They would be miles ahead of, obviously, Tom Corbett. But I think what Tom Wolf offers is an opportunity to, in fact, transform our politics. He certainly isn't a normal political candidate, but he's no babe in the woods. He's serious about policy, and he also has enough political experience in order to put a good administration together, but not so much political experience that he's captured.
Right. I mean, you're somebody who's been around the political game an awful lot, and one of the knocks that I've heard against former Revenue Secretary Wolf is that he's a little wet behind the ears. Maybe doesn't know how to give and take with the attacks that are going to come in a big way once the primary is over.
Well, he's getting attacked right now in a pretty strong way. So he's being introduced to hardball right now. I don't have any doubt that Tom is tough enough for the job. He's clearly smart enough for the job. And because of his different leadership style, he genuinely does appeal to what's good in all of us. I think he has a real chance of transforming the state. I think he can be a strong advocate for working people. And look, it matters not only what you're saying, but who the messenger is. And I think having a business person who is a real progressive delivering this message is going to be a powerful combination.
Yeah. Well, the McCord camp could probably say the exact same thing. And speaking of McCord, I understand he pretty much took your marijuana policy, your legalization policy, as his own. Where does Wolf stand?
I'm glad to say that all of the Democratic candidates have moved significantly on the issue of marijuana policy. I put out a 3-step reform plan, and the first step is medical marijuana, and we might even get some kind of medical marijuana bill done this year because Governor Corbett, thankfully, has begun to flip-flop on that.
No, I saw Senator Leach was going to have a sit-in, which I was going to participate in.
Yeah, I was too. But it would be better if we don't have to do that. And we'll see on Corbett how far he's really willing to go on medical marijuana. He may, in fact, just be doing enough to buy a little breathing space politically, but not enough to really address the problem.
I don't see how you can not be in favor of medical marijuana. I'm just, because, I mean, we're giving people opioids. We're giving them Oxycontin. We're giving them all kinds of things that they can get hooked on. Why not? Why? I don't understand. I get the argument why not legalizing, but I mean, just this little step towards putting it into the hands of physicians and sick patients doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. Well, you and I and 85% of the public want to put doctors in charge of that decision. It doesn't make any sense. And on the issue of legalization, of course, there's a reasonable discussion and debate, but actually I think it's overwhelmingly the case that we are, by criminalizing marijuana, making a huge mistake. It costs the taxpayers about $350 million to enforce these laws. We miss $300 million a year of tax revenue. And frankly, we are ruining good people's lives for smoking marijuana in the privacy of the home. And some people don't want to hear it, but the truth is marijuana is less damaging to health than cigarette smoking or alcohol. And also the truth is that today there are no restrictions on distribution and sale of marijuana to children. By regulating the marijuana in our state stores or in a licensed business, we'd have more control, not perfect control, but more control than we have today in our efforts to keep it out of the hands of children.
Now, there's a lot of that I'm in favor with. Here's my only concern with legalizing. My problem with legalizing it comes down to something very simple. Once Philip Morris and the tobacco companies or these big giant corporations get their hands on it, what happens to it? And that's my fear. It's right there next to the Tic Tacs on the shelf. They market it, they sell it, and what do they put in it to make it like they've done with tobacco? I mean, to me, that's my concern.
Well, look, I don't smoke. I do drink a drink or two a day, and I've never smoked marijuana. But I know we live in the real world, and what we're doing right now is the worst of all worlds. What we're doing right now is actually wasting money, not collecting revenue that could be used for education and drug addiction, and we're ruining people's lives. And last but not least, the enforcement of these laws are racially discriminatory. African Americans are being arrested in Pennsylvania at 5 times the rate of whites, even though the usage is essentially the same. So there's all kinds of reasons. I don't pretend that legalization brings heaven to earth. It won't be perfect, but compared to where we are today, it will be a better way to proceed.
So beyond medical marijuana, what conversations have you had with Governor Wolf or any of the candidates about pushing for legalization?
Right. Well, the other Democratic candidates are also in favor of decriminalization, which is the second step, and that is a reduction of the penalties so that we're no longer giving people misdemeanor and felony charges. Possession would be a summary offense. You're right, essentially a traffic ticket. All Democratic candidates are for decriminalization. So that is a big step in the right direction. Marijuana still would be illegal, and it would still be in the hands of the underground economy. We still would not be taxing it and raising revenue, and we still wouldn't be controlling its distribution through the state stores or the licensed business. But nonetheless, those are 2 very important steps forward, and all Democratic candidates are in favor of it.
And the chances of that getting through, given the complexity and the makeup of the General Assembly?
I think it's rising all the time. This is an issue that both the left and the right are beginning to find common ground on. And interestingly, the left and the right are beginning to find common ground on a range of criminal justice issues. And it's for the reason that particularly locking up so many non-violent drug offenders is very, very costly. And really, when you look at the details of some of these convictions, grossly unjust. So left and right are beginning to realize that decriminalization at least makes some sense, or a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I even folks who don't want to legalize, and I understand why some might not want to. I don't agree. I strongly don't agree, but at least I understand. When I ask them, well, do you want to lock people up and give them a permanent drug record, criminal record for the rest of their lives that can hurt them getting a job? The vast majority of people say, no, I don't want to do that. But that's what our laws do right now.
Yeah, and you're right, because I actually know several people who that happened to. When they were 18, 20 years old, they got caught, they got popped, and it has followed them every day since then.
Oh yeah, it can bar you from certain positions, certain careers. It can prevent you from certain kind of contracting. It really, really can damage a life, and it's a game of almost Russian roulette with your life. And let's put the hypocrisy on the table for a moment. The vast majority of people have smoked marijuana at one time or another. And thank goodness most of them weren't caught and their lives ruined with a criminal conviction. I mean, the President of the United States has been honest that he used a lot of marijuana at one point in his life.
So had he got caught, no presidency for him?
Probably not. And there's a lot of people, if they're being honest, know that they've engaged in this conduct, but they were lucky enough or not to have to carry around a criminal conviction for the rest of their lives. It's just cruel, destructive, and frankly stupid to taxpayers.
Yeah, that I agree with. I didn't want to get into the whole marijuana thing, but let me ask you the last one on this issue, because I did want to ask a couple other things. There are some, and as a kid growing up, I actually believed that it was the gateway to the next thing. When I was a kid growing up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, there was a guy, they found dead on the side of my house with a needle in his arm. When one of the biggest anti-drug messages you could have given me was, "There's that guy, he's dead. There's a needle in his arm because he was doing illegal drugs." Now, unbeknownst to me, he came back from Vietnam with a horrible heroin addiction. But here it was. Is marijuana a gateway drug? Does it lead you to the next thing?
Well, look, the first thing I want to say in response to your story is that nobody dies from an overdose of marijuana. I've asked coroners, have you ever put marijuana on somebody's death certificate? Most of them literally break out laughing. And when I ask, well, what about alcohol? What about heroin? And they say, of course. They're completely different substances. And the use of marijuana is not to be celebrated, and I certainly believe that there ought to be education to encourage the young not to drink, not to smoke tobacco, and I'm fine with education encouraging people not to smoke marijuana. But it has no relationship necessarily with any of those things, other than right now, in order to buy marijuana, you're probably buying it from somebody who is also selling other drugs like meth and perhaps cocaine, but maybe even heroin. Again, if you legalize this and regulate it properly, you start ending the underground economy. You start having more money for addiction and mental health treatment.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of that I absolutely agree with. Let me ask you a last line of questioning. Let's say Governor Wolf, or let's say, wow, I'm already there. Let's say Tom becomes governor, and how does he deal with the complexities of our General Assembly, given the nature? Do you think he's the best guy for that?
I do. I think he's going to have a message and be the kind of messenger that and is going to be able to find enough Republican votes to put together the Democrats to get a number of important things done. Not everything. I mean, there are some things that will be impossible in the General Assembly until we have a Democratic majority, and I hope the Democrats pick up seats in the State House and the State Senate. But I think Tom Wolf is actually well positioned to put together the kind of bipartisan majorities that are going to be needed for something like a minimum wage. I think the minimum wage is going to happen, and I think Tom Wolf, as a business leader, who can say with credibility that that raising the minimum wage is actually going to be good for our economy, will make it more likely to happen than our other good candidates. We have a number of other good candidates.
Yeah, I'm with you. But for me, one of the things I like about Tom Wolf is that you're right, that business experience of having the authority to say all of that stuff that we're being preached to on the extreme right, the extreme tax cuts, the deregulation, the race to the bottom in wages. That's not how you run a business. To me, I think that's pretty powerful.
It's very powerful. It's very, very powerful. That's the whole foundation to the Republican argument from issue to issue to issue. And I've for a long time been delivering the message that Democrats are good for the economy. Democrats are good for job creation. And there's a lot of data that you're well aware of, Rick, to back that up. But it's one thing for you to say it, one thing, frankly, for me to say it. And Tom Wolf is going to be a powerful messenger saying those things. More people are going to listen to it, and I think that will be good for progressive politics. I think it will help build the Democratic Party, which I think is very important in order to create the vote in the General Assembly to do much more than sort of the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, and we desperately need it. I mean, when Governor Corbett took office, we were a state that was creating jobs at the top end of the tier here in the country. Now we're at the, well, I guess 48th or 49th, depending on which numbers you use.
You're totally correct. In the last year of the Rendell administration, we ranked 7th in job creation, job growth in the United States. Since Tom Corbett has been in office from January 2011 until March of 2014, we ranked 49th in job growth. That's the fact. He's been a disaster for our economy, a disaster for job creation. No business person who cares about business should be voting for Tom Corbett. Some of the organized groups that are supporting Tom Corbett that claim to be business organizations are really more right-wing political organizations than they are true business groups anymore.
No.
You can't have a successful economy by slashing education. You can't have a successful economy by undercutting health care and infrastructure, and he's done all of these things.
Well, I mean, you're right on, and it's stuff we've talked about here on the program at length. So I'm hoping come May 20th, we get the candidate, move forward, and then we send Tom Corbett packing to South Carolina.
Yeah, he's got a nice condo in Hilton Head, and he needs to spend more time there. We need to help him. Turnout's going to be important. It's important in May, but it's going to be crucial come November.
Yeah, May 20th, the primary. Get out and vote, because I don't want to come here on the 21st, as I said earlier, and say only 13 or 15% of the people showed up. I want more.
Yeah, it would be good if we could at least get over 25% in the primary. That's pretty pathetic, but if we get over 25%, that would actually be a decent turnout for a primary. Come the general election, let's see if we can get to 50%.
There you go. John, I appreciate the time. It's always great talking with you. Thanks so much.
Take care, Rick.
Thanks so much, John Hanger, former gubernatorial candidate, also former head of the EPA here in PA. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
For the bosses, don't listen to their lies.
Still there?
Poor folks ain't got a chance unless they organize. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you? Which side? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side? Which side? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side? Which side?
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Month of May starts off with a fossil fuel bang.
And then it just went, phew. I mean, it was massive flames.
Oil train explodes in Virginia. Coal train spills in Maryland.
We have breaking news out of Pensacola, Florida this morning.
Natural gas explodes in Florida. More natural gas explodes in Texas.
Is almost a once-in-a-500-year event.
The scope of this disaster remains massive. Up to 2 feet of rain in 24 hours.
Record rains wash out Pensacola. Plus, the world's largest solar plant opens in Arizona. Explosion and spill free.
All of those explosions and spills straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
So when you're taking money from the oil and gas industry, it's because you're taking money to help America.
Yes, that's exactly it. This is your Green News Report.
Look, drill, baby, drill.
Okay, Desi Doyen, I've got so many snarky comments I could include here, including the fact that it hit 97 degrees yesterday. That's the last day in April out here in Los Angeles. It's that hot again today. It's going to be for the rest of the week. But you've got so many fossil-fueled explosions and spills. Never mind me. What do you have for us today?
Well, it was definitely a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week for fossil fuels, which were booming all over the U.S., and unlike the solar industry, not in a good way. First, a freight train carrying crude oil derailed and exploded in downtown Lynchburg, Virginia on Wednesday afternoon.
The CSX train was carrying at least a dozen tankers loaded with crude oil when it went off the rails, causing an explosion that sent a massive fireball and a plume of black smoke into the sky.
The oil tanker cars may have dumped up to 50,000 gallons of crude oil into the nearby James River, the primary water source for the city, and it also set the river itself on fire. Luckily, no deaths or injuries, but the massive fire forced evacuation of downtown, and officials say they're taking measures to protect the city's water supply.
When the Cuyahoga River in Ohio caught fire in 1969, it led to Richard Nixon forming the EPA. Maybe with the river on fire in Virginia, we'll finally be able to get rid of fossil fuels?
Not so fast. There is growing alarm, however, over the sudden increase in oil train explosions. That's prompted Canada to order an immediate phase-out of older model oil tanker cars. But in the U.S., the National Transportation and Safety Board warned last week that the U.S. is lagging behind in requiring safer and newer tanker cars.
And then the tanker cars exploded in Virginia.
Yeah, but that's not all. Within hours of the oil train explosion in Virginia, another fossil fuel train, this time carrying coal, derailed not too far away near Baltimore, Maryland. Initial reports suggest heavy rains may have washed out the track, and that dumped the coal cargo into nearby wetlands. But wait, there's even more. Out in western Texas, on the same day as the Lynchburg oil train explosion and the coal train spill in Maryland, a gas wellhead exploded and killed 2 workers and injured 9 others.
Well, at least that's the worst of it. I guess we're done now with those sorts of explosions and tragedies, for this week at least.
Nope, we're not. In western Florida, natural gas is believed to have been the cause of an explosion at a prison in Pensacola. That killed at least 2 inmates and injured more than 150 others and partially collapsed the building.
This jail had been flooded in those major storms that we told you about. More than 2 feet of rain here in this area.
That jail had been flooded in a freak rainstorm event that dumped nearly 2 feet of rain in 24 hours on Pensacola.
The scope of this disaster remains massive. More rain fell here than during Hurricane Ivan.
It was the same extreme storm system that spawned those deadly tornadoes in the southeast earlier in the week.
At least we know that 500-year storm in Pensacola has nothing to do with fossil fuel.
Funny you should mention that, because climate scientists predicted years ago that the emissions from burning fossil fuels would cause global warming that would bring more frequent and intense extreme weather events.
There you go, you and your facts again.
Finally, how about some good news?
Finally, how about some good news?
The world's largest solar plant is now up and running in Arizona. The Agua Caliente solar plant is now online, about the same capacity as a mid-sized natural gas plant, only this plant generates clean energy that is 100% explosion-free.
Wow, when you said it was a week from hell, you weren't kidding. For much more on the Week from Hell, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Please consider a donation there to help the Green News Report stay on the air so we can keep connecting the dots that very few others in the media seem willing to do. Download the Green News Report anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes, and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, ducking for cover, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
Green News Report.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
Where common sense, reason, and community come together. The Rick Smith Show.
Go back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You can also give me a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. So, new report out from the National Health Interview Survey. So, interesting numbers. They claim that in 2012, the prevalence of people smoking cigarettes was significantly higher among people ages 18 to 24, 17.3%. Ages 25 to 44 years old, 21.6%, and 45 to 64, 19.5%. Higher than those people over 65, who just under 9%. And you look at these numbers seem really high to me. I'm going, that many people still smoke? I guess, maybe it is what it is. And so you ask the question, then has this worked? The education campaign, has it worked? Or is it just that addictive? And I was just talking to a girl over at the gas station, and I met her outside, and she works there, and she was outside smoking. I'm going, I'm glad I didn't start that. She goes, oh yeah, you should be. Worst thing I ever did, because it's addictive. But no. I remember the tobacco hearings. No, it's not addictive at all. No, not at all. Here's an interesting poll. Gallup just came out. They're tracking the data of the uninsured. We are now at the lowest rate of uninsured in the country since Gallup began collecting this data back in 2008. Back in 2008, we were at 14.6, jumped up to as high as 18%, mostly thanks to the Bush recession, as people were losing their job and their health care. Continue to go up. Just this last report, down to 13.4%, the lowest percent since they began tracking this stuff, down from 15% in March and 18% in the third quarter of 2008. And as I look at this, you've got more than 8 million people who have signed up for the healthcare exchanges. And according to the latest data on this, it's proof that Obamacare is moving us in the right direction. It is working. People are getting coverage who need it. The uninsured rate for people who have households under 36,000 has fallen by 5.5% since the end of last year, and for Hispanics and African Americans, fallen even more, 5.5% for Hispanics, over 7% for African Americans. Let's go to the phone line. See who's on line one. How you doing tonight? What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Rick. This is Kurt. I am an anti-tobacco activist, a former child smoker, and a lot of that money that we got from the tobacco settlement was not spent on tobacco prevention. And we also have a very slick, powerful marketing system. And just to say that these electronic cigarettes, which it is apparently not illegal to sell to minors, have fruity flavors and all this stuff. So there's an effort to keep young people smoking. There's a lot of college kids who smoke because they smoke at parties, which alcohol and tobacco mix together. And no one, to my knowledge, has ever said, when you drink and smoke, you're going to synergize two drugs together and create another addiction. So, and Hill & Knowlton, the public relations firm that represented tobacco, also represents the gas industry. So we're dealing with similar bad people. And I just want to also thank you for your heartfelt expression at the beginning of your show, and want to thank you for being such a good dad, because you know what, we really need more effort from fathers, and we need more male responsibility, and we need to make it easier for our families to be good parents. But I just want to thank you for that, because that's very important to the future of our society.
Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate the thought, Kurt. Thanks so much. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, whatever you want to say, I just wanted to say a couple more things about what appears to be a very astoundingly low voter participation in our society. First of all, electronic voting, to my knowledge, is fraudulent. And when we talk about voter participation, we always talk about registered voters, but the actual number is possible voters, people who could actually register or don't, or so that number makes it even lower. And here's just a couple quick ideas. Why don't we have primaries become open, or they become privately funded? Because if you're going to have a closed primary, like in Pennsylvania, Democrats and Republicans have their own party event, which is fine, but we pay for that. And the great majority of us are independent voters, and that's actually the largest group of us. So we're being sort of swindled by the two political parties, which I think has actually failed us completely, in my honest estimation of how things are going. And so we need open primaries. We need to have more of a way to register voters, because when I see Democrats, and I actually went to a young Democrats meeting in Scranton many years ago, and I said, why don't we have voter registration events? And they looked at me like I was nuts. And
the third head?
What?
The third head? You didn't have that third head?
Oh, yeah, they're like, oh, what are you? I said, why don't we have ongoing efforts to communicate with potential voters and, project an idea to them about what we represent. This is when I was more of a Democrat. And I just, you got to admit that except for presidential campaigns, there's almost no real consistent effort to register voters. And that unless you see something different from what I see, and I see a culture of voting that is disappearing, because the young people, if you look at who is actually voting, it's mostly old people or older.
On the voting front, though, Kurt, I think a lot of harm came when the motor voting came on. Now, it was a great way to sign people up almost automatically, but that stopped, I think, in a way, of people organizing and doing what you're talking about, getting out and making sure that people were registered, and that constant engagement. So as soon as it became something automatic.
I never saw that.
What's that?
I never saw that in my life. I'm 47. I've never seen.
You never saw what?
And I never saw voter registration of events or our efforts beyond the presidential campaign.
Well, what I'm saying is the parties, or at least the Democrats, I think, lost the habit of doing that. Now, I got to understand, motor voting has been 20 years ago. Because I do remember the events all the time, but then again, I lived in Cleveland at the time where there was a little bit different of a party structure than where I live now. So
you recognize that Pennsylvania might not have. I mean, listen, we have a majority Democratic state run completely by Republicans.
Right. Well, that has a lot to do with the gerrymandering as well.
That's right. They're very sophisticated in how they structure these things. And just to quickly tell you something, we have this thing in Lackawanna County where this guy Volpe is running this Fix Lackawanna plan, and I heard them talk about it on one of the right-wing stations. They want to make it so they can sort of gerrymander control of Lackawanna County out of the city, which is mostly Democratic. So, just give you the heads up of what some of their more sophisticated ploys are. And, we're in the hands, and I just want to summarize. I feel that this republic is in great jeopardy from fascism, and that just, in my summary, is when businesses control your government.
Well, there are some who would argue we're already there, Kurt. In fact, if you read the Princeton...
Well, we're there. Either way, it could get a lot worse, and if we don't respond with individual, personal efforts to protect our families, our main streets against Wall Street predators and the global schemes and stuff, we're kind of going to be doomed. And I believe in America, and I believe in Pennsylvania, and you know, I want to thank you for being here and providing us an opportunity to talk about these important things.
Appreciate it, Kurt. Thanks for the call. Call anytime. You know, but here's the thing, and look, you know, with the voter registration thing, I'm in favor of same-day registration. I think everybody should have the ability to vote. And if you go back and you remember the pictures after Bush invaded Iraq, and you remember the pictures of the women who have the ink on their fingers, because we went to the Bush Monument Museum, library, whatever you want to call it, with the giant wall of freedom. Yeah, nobody ever told me how much it cost to get on the giant wall of freedom, to have your name in foot-high letters in the granite or whatever, I think it was granite. You know, the Koch brothers were there, and Bill Gates was there, and Buffett was there on the wall of freedom. You know who wasn't on there? Not one of the people who died in Iraq so that they could take that picture of the woman with the ink on her finger to signify that she had voted for the first time, to signify that she was a free voter. And what's interesting to me, and I wasn't going to go off on a whole voting rant, but since Kurt brought it up, we're seeing tons of stories across the country of Republicans figuring out new, more sophisticated ways of blocking people's access to the ballot box. And you could go back, you know, to the beginning of time, people have tried to do this, but the Republicans have turned masters at it. These last several presidential elections, these last 15 years, masters. 2000 was amazing from the mindset of, hey, how do we keep people from voting? How do we get rid of that voter roll? How do we end all of that? I mean, really, they did a masterful job with the. You've all heard the story of Choice Point and how Jeb Bush, how Jeb paid this Choice Point to go and purge the list of felons. Now, the state government used to do that for a very minimal cost. They then outsourced it to somebody else who, you know, they took some liberties. So if your name was Bob Jones, Bobby Jones, he got tossed off the voter rolls. Robert Jones, he got tossed off the voter rolls. You know, any of those names that may have sounded black, like Billy Washington. Well, Bill Washington got kicked off. Willie Washington got kicked off. And you see how this all works. And I know Greg Palast, who I'm wishing Greg the very best. I know he just went in for a triple bypass surgery. But Greg Palast wrote a phenomenal book, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, and pointed this out. And showed in fact, he showed in the voter rolls where they purged a guy who wasn't going to commit a felony for another 7 years. They had actually said that his felony was in 2007. This is 2000. They're very clairvoyant over there at Choice Point. And, you know, he did an amazing job of breaking this. Problem was, he didn't break it until Bush was already president. And the cabinet was in place, and he had sworn in, and there's no going back at that point. And then you look at 2000, you look at the caging that went on, how they would send out, new voter registration, say, oh, well, we've got to check your address because you may have moved, and then put it on there that they couldn't forward it. So that what would happen is once it wouldn't get forwarded, it'd get sent back because you couldn't forward it on, and then it would just sit in a cage, thus caging. They're masters at figuring out the manipulation, at figuring out the backdoor way of doing this stuff. But what they're not masters of is creating an economy that works for everybody. What they're not masters of is making sure that kids have enough to eat. What they're not masters of is making sure that workers have rights and that they're safe. And what they're not masters of is figuring out how to get people the insurance that they need to make sure that they're well taken care of. And all of the things that I just talked about Obamacare, the number of people signing up, and in big numbers, much more than the Republicans ever thought. It's looking like things are going well. Yet here, all we hear from the Republicans is they want to repeal it. Got to repeal. They're not even talking about replacing anymore. And now you've got the Obamacare truthers they're not arguing that Obamacare is bad anymore. They're just saying, well, the people won't pay their premiums. And they came out with some trumped up little survey, some nonsense. And it's the House Republicans, you know this is. who said that, I think it was, they claimed that only 2/3 of the people paid their premiums. Yet when you look at the numbers that they used, they didn't include all the people who signed up after March 15th, which is, I guess, a couple million. And when you look at the companies that were then pulled after the fact, like Blue Cross, who said 85% of the people who signed up are paying. WellPoint said 90% of the people who signed up are paying. It's really all about just, hey, how can we get people to look at the healthcare law as negative? Now, me personally, there's things I'd like to fix. There are things that, I'm still not fond of the fact that, most of it is your ability to pay related. Because at the end of the month, what happens if you have to make a decision between sugar, shoes, or healthcare? That's a concern to me. To me, healthcare should be a right that everyone has, a right that regardless of your situation, your station in life, you're taken care of if you get sick. To me, that makes sense. And as we move forward throughout all of this, we're going to continue to hear the right wing say, oh, we need to repeal and replace or just destroy. That's really what it's about. It's just about destroying. We'll take a quick break, right back with Hour 2. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
And everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
It's the Rick Smith Show on Country Gold Radio, WIOO Carlisle, and WEEO Shippensburg.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The 288,000 U.S. jobs added in April was welcome news for workers. Accounting for upward revisions of the last 2 months of data, the U.S. economy has added an average of 234,000 jobs a month for 3 months. The AFL-CIO says it's a significant step in the right direction for working families, but there are miles to go before we sleep. The Labor Federation is urging congressional leaders to build on the good jobs news by passing comprehensive jobs legislation, extending unemployment insurance, and raising the minimum wage to help growth continue. The Center on Economic and Policy Research says that the drop in the national official jobless rate from 6.7 to 6.3% in April was entirely the result of 800,000 people leaving the labor force. Total employment, as measured by the Household Survey, actually dropped by 73,000 in April. Meanwhile, private sector wages and salaries in the first quarter of 2014 grew at the slowest rate ever since the Bureau began tracking that data in March of 1980. Leaders of New York City's Municipal Labor Committee have approved a multi-billion-dollar labor deal for teachers on a 20-2 vote. Voting starts today for the members of the 100 municipal unions that make up the committee. The city's deal with the United Federation of Teachers gives raises of 18% over 9 years with retroactive back pay to 2009. It could be a template applied to conclude labor contracts with other city unions. The deal depends on health care cost savings targets the unions must hit. The city's Health Stabilization Fund could be tapped to help with health benefits costs. With 500 supporters at the meeting, the 15 Now National Conference in Seattle voted Saturday to move ahead with a signature gathering campaign for a $15 an hour minimum wage to keep pressure on the Seattle City Council. The 15 Now Conference wants a backup plan in case the City Council fails to approve a real $15 an hour wage that covers all workers. International Association of Machinists Local 751 and IBEW Local 46 PAC are among the groups endorsing the ballot initiative. Seattle's mayor last week proposed a $15 an hour minimum wage indexed to inflation to be phased in over 3 to 5 years. IAM Local 751 Political Director Larry Brown said Boeing's approach to workers over the past years shows the need to build working-class solidarity in communities and to revive grassroots mobilization of working people. The Teamsters have won the first executive pay reform proposal to win a majority of shares cast at a publicly traded U.S. company's annual shareholders meeting. The proposal calls on Gannett to, quote, end the practice of accelerating the vesting of senior executives' equity awards in the event of a change in control, end quote. Ken Hall, Teamsters General Secretary-Treasurer, says the union doesn't believe executives should get guaranteed windfalls from change of control situations. The union says compensation based on pay for performance is better in change of control situations. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
Rich pay too much taxes, the poor get way too much. Instead of schools, build prisons and lock the children up. We won't believe those lies again, because God is a Republican.
Oh, yes, God is a Republican, and he wants you praying at all of your functions. All of them, all of the government functions, all your school functions, everything. And according to my one friend, only his prayer. So we could debate on what that is. And what I'm talking about is simply the Supreme Court today upheld the right of Greece, New York, to say a prayer before their meetings. And my question right when this case was going on is, well, what happens if I don't agree with your prayer? What if I have a different one? What if my one friend who is an avowed Satanist, what if he wants to offer a prayer? Those are questions that now I got to wonder. And is the wall of separation between church and state now destroyed? And if so, can we start taxing them? Here to answer a couple of those questions, a good friend of the program, Ian Millhiser. He's a senior constitutional policy analyst over at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. He's also the editor of Think Progress's Justice blog. Ian, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be back. Thank you so much.
So I look at this decision. Are you? I guess first, are you surprised that the court went in this direction?
I'm not surprised that the court went in this direction. I am surprised at how far they went in this direction. There's two big shifts that come from this case. The first is that the court said legislative prayer was allowed in 1983. So legislative prayer is nothing new. That's when you open a legislative session by having a chaplain get up and give some kind of invocation. But there's always been a fundamental assumption that these prayers were going to be fairly anodyne, they weren't going to be particularly sectarian, and prayers that aggressively pushed one religious sect's particular views were viewed with a great deal of skepticism. And the Supreme Court tossed that out. They said that legislatures can open up with pretty much whatever prayer the chaplain wants. The only limit is that the prayers can't threaten damnation or preach conversion or something like that. But if you want to get up there and say something that's, very particular to a particular faith, that's something that the Supreme Court allowed. The Justice Kennedy, who wrote the opinion, his attitude is that religion is this very calming, civilizing force. So why wouldn't we want more of it in our legislative sessions? Why wouldn't we want more sectarian prayers, I suppose?
Hold on. Religion is soothing and calming. Did we miss all of the Crusades? Did we miss the jihads? Did we miss the holy wars and all of that stuff?
I kind of wonder which history books they're reading at times. I think there were two shifts. The other shift is that the court started to tear down the prohibition of government endorsements of religion. And that's a really scary thing to tear down. The reason why you don't want your government endorsing religion is because right now when I go to the polls, I base my vote on, tax policy or labor policy or healthcare policy. I don't base it on whether or not the guy I vote for is going to use my tax dollars to preach my religious views and not someone else's religious views.
So you're not a registered Republican then?
I'm not to, yeah.
Because I know most of my Republican friends, that's all they vote on. Does he go to the same kind of church? Does he believe in God? And well, I think just about everybody does. What has that got to do with, as you pointed out, tax policy or labor issues?
Well, but here's what's not allowed, though. It's like it is not allowed that my elected officials could say, well, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Protestant, I'm a Jew, or whatever, so I am going to build a monument to my faith with taxpayer dollars. What's not allowed is you're not allowed to spend the government's money, at least you haven't been allowed to spend the government's money, to advance your particular religious views. And if you start to tear down this rule, which the Supreme Court started to do today, which is there can't be government endorsements of religion, you can see the government deputized as an agency to promote religious viewpoints. And that's where things start to get very scary. That's when you start to see voters say, not just, okay, this guy goes to my church, not just, okay, this guy shares my faith, but this guy shares my particular view about this narrow religious question, and he's going to use the government to make sure everyone gets to hear that viewpoint. That is a very divisive thing if you have multiple candidates competing over who's going to take my tax dollars and your tax dollars and use it to advance their views.
I got to tell you, as I'm listening to you say this, it's going back to something I said years ago on this program, that when Bush came out with his faith-based initiatives, I remember going, well, it'll be interesting to see who fights over to get the money and how that money is then distributed based on which faiths. And I said, it'll be really interesting to watch the different sects of different religions go after each other. Maybe we could watch it all on CNN or on C-SPAN or something. It'd be good battle royale.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think will be interesting to watch, this Supreme Court isn't too keen on the separation of church and state, but the way that a friend of mine put it is, what happens when we're talking about the separation of mosque and state? What happens? What happens when all of a sudden these 5 justices, who right now are in the majority as Christians, and it's interesting that all the Christians were on one side of the case except for one, Justice Sotomayor, and all the Jews were on a different side of the case. So, what happens when these folks suddenly find a faith that they do not belong to?
Well, that's why I asked about my friend the Satanist. I guess now what you're saying is by that not being picked up on earlier, is now Muslims and people with mosques are looked upon worse than Satanists?
Well, so what the opinion said today is, it said for legislative prayer, there can't be discrimination. So if your friend the Satanist wants to come and offer a Satanist prayer, there's nothing in this opinion that says that they can't. The question is whether or not the court will actually honor that non-discrimination practice, rule in practice. We've seen Scalia wrote a very important decision saying that religious liberty doesn't mean that much when it was a Native American faith that wanted to use a drug called peyote in their religious rituals. But all of a sudden, when it was conservative Christians who didn't want their employees to use birth control, Scalia felt very strongly that a different result was required.
Yeah, it is interesting when you look at this court. They are a little schizophrenic when it comes to the decisions they make, and I guess it's based on power. I mean, I look at the couple of the last decisions, the Citizens United, the McCutcheon, the minority rights, these very wealthy people, their rights have to be protected, but actual minorities in the affirmative action case, no, not so much.
Well, I mean, you wonder if they think there's only one poor oppressed minority in this world, and it's the rich white man. That's certainly the impression you get from cases like Citizens United and McCutcheon, where they bend over, not just do they bend over backwards, but they twist precedents, and they twist the First Amendment to knots in order to reach this result that says that the right of rich people to spend unlimited amounts of money to influence elections is sacred. But then when someone, as a condition of their going and speaking to their city council, and maybe it's a zoning issue, who knows what it is, but something that's very important to them that they want to speak about, what a condition of that is they have to sit through a religious ceremony for a faith they may not subscribe to, where they have to feel the subtle pain of being told that I am an outsider, that they are an outsider because it's not their faith that's on stage, it's someone else's faith that's on stage. All of a sudden this Supreme Court isn't too sympathetic to those kinds of minorities.
Yeah. So the question is in looking at this court, can they be trusted to make any of because I remember, and maybe I'm the only person that remembers, John Roberts during his confirmation said, I'm just balls and strikes, just going to call balls and strikes. That's it. Nothing more. I don't, we're talking a massive strike zone then.
It's a really massive strike zone, except when he wants to move it over and everything's a ball. I actually have a book coming out next year called The Case Against the Supreme Court. So I'm fairly cynical about the Supreme Court as an institution. There's a lot of psychological research on this that shows that essentially when you place people with very strong views, very strong partisan views in a situation where they have to confront information that runs counter to their views, all of us, we have a remarkable talent for rationalizing away things that undermine our fundamental beliefs. So what happens when you have Supreme Court justices and their fundamental beliefs align pretty well with the preferences of the Republican Party? It means that they're not necessarily going to be moved by the arguments in their brief. It means that when they hear arguments that should be convincing, they'll have a tendency to rationalize them away. And, the question we need to ask is that if that's how these justices are going to behave, how can we trust them with a lifetime appointment where there's no way to vote them out of office if we don't like what they're doing?
Yeah, and that's the thing that gets me. I mean, I look at this court, and there's nothing good coming down the pike anytime soon, or nothing even sane in my view. And what we end up with is we end up with the two classes: the very wealthy controlling everything over the rest of us, and the laws being stacked against us.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important to realize, this is a lot of what I'm going to talk about in my book is that the Supreme Court's been like this for a really long time. We had this short period when Warren was Chief Justice, and then for a few years after it, where you had things like Brown v. Board of Education, and you had one person, one vote, and all these wonderful things happened. I think a lot of people look back on that period, just maybe 20, 25 years, and think of it like that was normal. That was a huge aberration. The history of the Supreme Court was they decided Dred Scott and said that slavery is great. Then they spent 30 years tearing down the 3 constitutional amendments that were ratified in order to get rid of Dred Scott. Then they spent 40 years handing down cases like the Lochner opinion, which said that laws protecting workers were going to be thrown out left and right. And then you have this brief period where they weren't doing harm, and people think of that as if that's normal, and it is not normal. What we're seeing from the Roberts Court is really a reversion to the way the Supreme Court has behaved for most of its history.
So we're just going back in history and undoing all of the progress of the New Deal and that period after World War II.
I mean, potentially. The good news is that there's only one justice right now, Justice Thomas, who said he'd go back to the era where things like child labor laws were considered unconstitutional, where the minimum wage was considered unconstitutional, where any kind of protection for workers who want to unionize was considered unconstitutional. Only Thomas has said he would go that far. But there's 4 other justices who said they will go pretty far. And if the election goes away where, there are plenty of people who want to be president right now, some of whom are viable candidates, who would love to see 4 more Thomases on the Supreme Court. And there are 4 justices right now who are in their 70s or their late 70s or their early 80s. So that president could get their wish if they're elected. It is not at all outside of the realm of possibility.
Here again, 2016 is an enormous year. Whoever's in the White House at the time, chances are going to appoint 2, possibly 3 justices.
Yeah, possibly as many as 4. And almost certainly you're going to see the court flip. If Scalia and Kennedy are both in their late 70s, if they are replaced by a liberal justice, it is a whole new world. Then we're talking about getting rid of Citizens United. We're talking about getting rid of things like partisan gerrymandering. We're talking about rolling back a lot of the bad labor decisions, a lot of the bad workers' rights decisions. The last time we were seeing there's a whole new world. But it's also potentially a whole new world if one of the liberals are replaced and the court becomes even more conservative, or even if Scalia or Kennedy is replaced by someone more conservative. It's important to understand that in the Reagan administration, conservatives and the Republican Party were so shell-shocked by Roe that they were willing to embrace judicial restraint because judicial restraint meant there wouldn't be any Roe v. Wade. Now they've controlled the court for so long, you're starting to see this respect for judicial restraint melt away. The younger people who are likely to be judges in a future Republican White House are much more conservative than Justice Scalia, and I know that that's saying a lot. They're much more likely to be sympathetic to arguments about judicial restraint, and that means that you could see a court that is even more aggressive in trying to push a conservative agenda simply through litigation.
It'll be interesting to see where this goes. And for me, this decision today is just another one of those moments where you go, 2016 looks even more important now than 2012 did.
Yeah, no, it is going to be a big deal. I mean, like I said, whatever happens with the court, chances are that neither all the conservatives nor all the liberals are going to be able to hold on until 2020. And so if a conservative is replaced by a liberal, if a liberal is replaced by a conservative, either way, it's a whole new world with the Supreme Court.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. But this decision, to me, just the beginning of that, the beginning of tearing down the wall, if not the end of the wall.
That's right. The biggest shift today, set aside the question of what happens with legislative prayers, the biggest shift today is they started to tear down the rule which says that government shall not endorse religious faith. And if that rule goes away, then you're entering into a pretty frightening world where our politics starts to be much more about what are the particular religious views that the candidates will advance, and not, the things that our politics should be about, who's going to deliver the best healthcare policy, who's going to deliver the best labor policy, who's going to deliver the best tax policy, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, Ian, I appreciate you taking time for us, explaining this out for us, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Great. I look forward to that as well.
Thanks so much, our good friend Ian Millhiser, Senior Constitutional Policy Analyst over at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. He's also the editor of Think Progress, the Justice blog. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Today is a beginning. Frankly, this is a test for all of us.
Yes, this is a beginning. It's the 5th of May, 2014, and this is Luke Vargas for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. Buckle up. Let's recap the day's top global headlines in 2. It's been 3 weeks since the terrorist group Boko Haram kidnapped more than 200 schoolgirls in Nigeria. And over the weekend, President Goodluck Jonathan sounded a hopeful message, saying he had no intelligence they had been harmed.
Wherever these girls are, we'll surely get them out. There's no story that any of them has been hurt in terms of injured or death.
But despite these reassurances, there are growing concerns the girls could meet a very bad fate. Today, Boko Haram's leader, Abubakar Shekau, issued a video statement saying his group was responsible for the abduction and that the girls would soon be sold at the market, saying he was commanded by Allah to do so. Meanwhile, in South Sudan, after conflicting reports this morning, government forces loyal to President Salva Kiir appear to have retaken the small but strategic town of Bentiu. Since fighting broke out in South Sudan in December, control of the town has switched hands between the government and rebels nearly a half dozen times. In addition to being an oil hub, Bentiu is also home to thousands of civilians who have fled into a nearby U.S.
This Mother's Day, don't settle for the same old box of chocolates. Give Mom a gift she'll really appreciate. A gift that'll truly make a difference. Give her a heart necklace made by women who have survived actual war in South Sudan. These necklaces contain Swarovski crystals and are simply stunning. They come in all different colors and sizes, and best of all, they help fund a great cause. It's what Mom would want. To purchase your gift, visit goatsfortheoldgoat.com and click on Shop. Again, that's goatsfortheoldgoat.com/shop.
Hey there, fellow working class heroes. I have some great news. You can now get the Rick Smith Show podcast on your iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, or Palm on demand and on the go. Get your class war to go by downloading the Stitcher app on your smartphone by going to Stitcher.com and search for The Rick Smith Show, or go to our website at thericksmithshow.com and click on our Stitcher button. Together we can, and we will, rebuild a prosperous working class and leave opportunity for our children.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The sad thing is the enemy, sadly, I mean, you look at the recent decisions by this Supreme Court and you gotta wonder. I mean, this most recent decision, you know, it just leaves me almost speechless to think that this court has gone that far to the extreme, to that far to the ideological extreme. And you go, oh, well, you know, it's only a simple prayer. I'm going, well, yeah, there are places for that. At a function of government, I'm not so sure. And the question is, what does the new world look like? Are we going to have to go to events where 5, 6, 10 people, because it's now their guaranteed right to stand up and give their prayer? Does it mean now we got to sit through 10 prayers? And look, I'm not against it. If we're going to do that, then okay, fine. We've decided on that. And what ends up happening then is we self-regulate and say, no more prayers. I don't want to go through that hour-long process of having everybody have their prayer. Because I got to tell you, then I would start to be obnoxious too. Got to have mine. And I would think of something. But to me, it's another one of these moments where you start looking at this court with a jaundiced eye. And while we're focused on these, while we're focused on the Greece cases, while we're focused on the ideological stuff, what's really slipped under the radar? I mean, we've got the Citizens United, the McCutcheon, you know, a lot of that stuff, huge headlines, lots of attention, but a lot of stuff that we never even hear of, mostly pro-business. And you look at this group, the Constitutional Accountability Center. They have, and I've used this number before because it's been accurate the whole time. They've said that the Roberts Court has sided with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce 70% of the times when there's a case before the court. 71%, which means whatever the case is, they're siding on the business's side. And that's not unlike our court system as a whole. So when you hear the people say, well, we're only being sued for nonsense. No, you get the court stacked. Why do they spend so much money? And, you know, down the line, the question then becomes, you know, where do we end up? Where do we end up when it comes to labor laws, to workers' rights? Where do we end up when it comes to our right to strike? Where do we end up when it comes to our rights to collective bargaining? Where does this end up? Because, look, the business community wants to outlaw all that stuff. You look at Mississippi, for instance, where they've banned picketing. You no longer can picket in a labor management dispute. Can't do it. Can't boycott. What? I can't say I'm not going to buy a product from you unless you let your workers organize. That's illegal now. And the question is, when those cases go to the Supreme Court, and they will, where does this court decide? Does this court decide on the right of peaceable assembly, the right to protest, the right to strike, the right to stand on a street corner and say, hey, these no good for nucks? Or does it say, no. The power of the gun is going to shut your mouth? I mean, these are huge, huge questions for me. And if I look at the decisions that this court has made, time and time again, they have sided with the business interests. They have sided with the moneyed interests, often. And that's scary stuff. Because I look to the past, and Ian brought up the Lochner era. I kind of believe that in 50, 100 years, this court's going to hopefully be looked back on as the abomination. But that's going to take some sanity and some rational thought. And the hope is that, this is, to me, why 2016 is so important, and really why 2020 is that important as well. Whoever appoints those justices, the complexity of, think of the Bush legacy. All of this stuff that's going on, the Citizens United, the McCutcheon, all of this stuff, it's the Bush legacy, because he did it. Quick break, right back.
It don't matter to me, as long as we can live in harmony. Why can't we be friends?
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
They're back. They're rested. They're ready. Our Congress critters, that is. They've returned to their workplace after enjoying a badly needed 2-week Easter vacation. After all, it had been a full 4 weeks since their last vacation in March. And meanwhile, they'd been doing a lot of heavy lifting. You know, passing a jobs bill, raising the minimum wage, and extending long-term unemployment benefits for millions of desperate folks who've been unable to find jobs. Yes, sirree, our legislative leaders have been working like mules to strengthen America's hard-hit middle class. Oh, wait, my mistake. They haven't passed any of that stuff. In fact, the GOP House, along with the Republicans in the Senate, have been working overtime to kill any bills to lift up America's workaday families. Still, as you might imagine, killing bills can plumb tucker you out. So those lawmakers, or in this case, law killers, undoubtedly needed a break. Sure enough, now that they're back at the congressional grindstone, they seem full of pep, ready to say no again and again. Only a week after returning, for example, Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell rose up on his hind legs, mustered a burst of negative energy, and zapped dead a Democratic proposal to hike America's minimum wage. As a result of Mitch's legislative labor of love, millions of hardworking people will remain stuck in poverty wage jobs for the foreseeable future. Who benefits from such a Dickensian effort? McDonald's, Domino's Pizza, Taco Bell, and other multi-billion-dollar giants that profit by holding down their own workers. This is Jim Hightower saying, the widening chasm of income inequality in our land of opportunity is no accident. It exists, and it grows worse by political design. Americans would be better off if those designing lawmakers just stayed on vacation.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
So now you see the light. Hey, stand up for your right. Come on, get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the
You got to get up, stand up. While it's still legal, while you still can, before the Supreme Court takes that away. And I'm telling you, you see these laws in places like Mississippi banning people being able to boycott or protest or picket. You see this stuff, and it's got to be scary because it's only a step until the Supreme Court, where the highest court in the land says, yeah, that's constitutional. It's scary stuff. And I look all across this country as workers, and the reason that they're spending all of this money, this time, this energy, banning picketing, banning boycotts, basically making it impossible for workers to organize, is because they know the conditions are ripe. They know for the last several years they've been robbing us blind. I mean, really, you look at the decline in wages, the benefits being taken away, especially when you look at these hugely profitable companies. And the latest one that caught my attention is this Geisinger Lewiston Hospital, where evidently they made about $300 million last year. And the contract that they've offered their employees is one to cut your salaries and do away with a retirement plan for people who are making like $13 an hour. And for me, I go, enough, which is why tomorrow, I understand, the workers have decided that they're going to take to the street on a one-day strike to show management that they are serious. And I've got one of the workers here on the line. Her name is Ann McCallum. She's a 7.5-year employee in the dietary department there at Geisinger Lewiston Hospital. And thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome.
So,
thanks for having me.
So tell me, how did it get to this point? I mean, in some of the folks that I've talked to, there's always been like kind of a decent relationship. How'd you get to this point?
Well, they just don't want to. They pretty much gave us the last final negotiation contract, and they want to take our pension away and give us a 2% pension in a 403k plan. I'm sorry, 403b plan.
A 403b? What exactly is a 403?
A 403b plan is based on the stock market. And we all know that people who lost thousands of dollars the last time the market crashed. And that's just not a secure retirement.
No, and you would think, and look, I'm glad that you brought that up, because you would think most working people who got shafted during the 2008 Bush collapse would realize, hey, not the greatest idea. We want those defined benefit plans that our parents and our grandparents had. So they're trying to, this extremely profitable hospital is trying to take that away from the workforce.
Yes, and they are actually willing to pay $6 million to leave our current pension plan. And those $1 million should be invested in the workers, not spent on a penalty that ultimately hurts workers.
Now that doesn't. How do you justify that? I mean, say, okay, fine, put that $6 million in that defined plan. We're happy. We're golden. So tomorrow you're going to the streets for a one-day strike, as I understand, correct?
Yes.
What's the hope that comes out of that?
Hoping that they will sit down and listen to us and work with us and not get rid of our pension plan.
Because to this point, what you're saying is they give you your last best and final offer, which is a take it or leave it. And if you like it, you go to the curb if you want. You're just saying, hey, we're serious. We're gonna take it to the public. What are you hoping the general public hears and sees out of this?
We want them to see that because Geisinger is a multi-million-dollar healthcare system, they do not need to make cuts in middle-class jobs.
As I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as I read, most of the people that are at the bottom of the scale are in the $13 an hour range, right?
Yes.
I don't know that those are real middle-class jobs. I would say we should be raising those up to make them middle-class jobs instead of cutting wages. And I understand there was a wage cut involved in that as well?
Yes. The new hires, they would take like a $2 pay cut.
Oh, you got to love that. That's one of the things that drives me insane. And you know why they do that? It's real simple. They're trying to divide and conquer. All the new people who come in who are at a different wage tier, the hope is, and corporations have been doing this for years, hoping that there'll be a wedge between you and the new employees based on that $1 or $2 or whatever it is. And that's how they destroy the workers organizing and destroy people's unions. That's the goal.
You are absolutely right.
So I gotta tell you, Ann, I'm thrilled to hear that people have had enough, and I've been saying for a while that there have got to be more of these, to where people are out in the streets and saying, hey, these are the conditions. We're coming out of the shadows. We're coming out into the streets and letting people know that not only can we do it, but you can too.
Yes, I agree 100%. And that's hopefully the message we can get across tomorrow.
So you've worked at this place for 7.5 years. 7.5 years of your life. Did you ever think that you'd be at this point where they're doing the things that they're doing?
No, I haven't. I actually thought I would be doing better than what I am doing now.
I mean, because you do anything for 7.5 years, it means either you gotta love what you do.
And I do. I love it.
And you work in the dietary department, and to me, one of the being a bigger guy, one of the most important parts of the entire hospital, because you got to eat, right?
Yes, that's right.
And some of the things that you've been given a number of accommodations for going above and beyond. And this is the thing I love about nurses and people who work in hospitals, that it's not about the money, it's about doing their job. And even when they're recognized for going above and beyond, to them it's not that big of a deal, is it?
No, it's not. It's my job. It's what I'm there for, to take care of the patient.
And what I find really disheartening is, I've talked to a number of nurses, I've talked to a number of healthcare providers, a number of folks like you over the years who tell that same story, that they care about their patients, not the hospital's patients. They care about the people that they deal with. And it's interesting to me that the hospitals don't seem to care much about the people who are doing the work for them.
That's how it seems. Yes. The nurses, the patients, that's what I'm there for.
So in looking at this, this is a one-day strike, right? So after tomorrow, we're going to hand out leaflets. We're going to make the public aware. You go back to work the next day, right?
Yes.
And hopefully this one-day action will bring negotiators back to the table, because this is really about negotiating, right? You're not unreasonable. You just want to sit down and bargain for a decent contract.
Yes.
Not like the contract that the CEO of Geisinger put in his own pocket, which I guess he got, 125% raise in 2012?
Makes over $5 million a year.
Wow. What kind of pension does he have?
That's what I'd like to know.
It's interesting to me, though. You see these folks in the CEO class, the people who sit up in the corner office and look down on the rest of us, and they say, "Oh, we can't raise the minimum wage because that would raise prices." But you look at their take out of the company or out of the service or whatever, and you go, "How do we afford you?" And that's the question I always ask: how do we afford these CEOs?
Yeah, I'd like to know that too.
Because for me, the question is not, should we be paying 13 or 15 or 20 bucks an hour to the person who's when I'm sick and at my lowest, taking care of me and making sure that everything is clean and safe and everything, my food is right. I don't have a problem paying them a decent wage. I do have a problem with the bean counter sitting in the corner office figuring out how to screw people like you out of a little bit of salary and healthcare and retirement.
And I'm tired of being screwed.
And I guess that's the reason that that your workforce, that your folks are taking to the street tomorrow. What do you expect? What do you expect the conditions to be like tomorrow? Have you ever done anything like this before?
No, I have never done anything like this before.
And what are your expectations? What do you think is going to happen?
I'm hoping everybody stands united. We really need to stick together. And I'm hoping the community sees and hears what they need to see and hear. And I'm just praying that Geisinger will sit down and negotiate fairly.
Yeah, I'm with you. And at the end of the day, I think you hit it right there. Sit down, negotiate fairly. Too often what we've seen going on across the country is these CEOs and their ilk, they see the conditions being what they are throughout our economy, and it's opportunity time for them. Hey, we can go and we can take back those hard-fought gains in wages. We can take back those benefits, that retirement or that little bit of health care that they get. It's an opportunity to steal back. And we look over the last several years, they have done a masterful job of robbing from you and me, and I'm glad to see that someone is standing up and saying no, Ann.
That's what I'm trying to do.
So how can we help? What can we at the Rick Smith Show do tomorrow? Give me a marching order. Tell everybody I know that Geisinger, Lewiston, they're in the middle of a one-day strike. The CEO's basically screwing them. Guy who took a 125% raise in 2012 now wants to justify his raise by taking it away from the people who actually care for the sick. To me, that's mind-blowing. Maybe call the hospital and say, hey, negotiate. There's an idea.
Yeah, there you go. That's my order.
Because I think people have to be outraged, and it's not just because it's in your neck of the woods. Because if it's in your neck of the woods today, it's going to be in my neck of the woods tomorrow. And we've got to be thinking that we're all in this together. We're not divided. We're united. And what happens to you eventually is going to happen to me. And I don't want to see you get the shaft, because I certainly don't want to see it happen to me.
Yeah, exactly.
It is that simple. And I wish you nothing but the best of luck tomorrow. I look forward to hearing how things went, and I'd love to talk to you again.
Okay. Me too. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ann. Ann McCullough, a 7.5-year employee there at the Geisinger Lewiston Hospital. And seriously, if you've got the opportunity, Google it. Call the hospital and say, hey, negotiate with those folks. They do quality work. They're good to their patients. Treat them right. To me, it's that simple. Doesn't get any simpler than that. Quick break. Right back.
Bills are creeping through the door. It's desperate times, so desperate measures we explore. Marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out. Where's our government? Lawsuits and arraignments. Members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Lock billions off our backs, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money, we work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations, it's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thoughts are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Month of May starts off with a fossil fuel bang.
And then it just went, whew. I mean, it was massive flames.
Oil train explodes in Virginia. Coal train spills in Maryland.
We have breaking news out of Pensacola, Florida this morning.
Natural gas explodes in Florida. More natural gas explodes in Texas.
Is almost a once-in-a-500-year event.
The scope of this disaster remains massive. Up to 2 feet of rain in 24 hours.
Record rains wash out Pensacola. Plus, the world's largest solar plant opens in Arizona. Explosion and spill free.
All of those explosions and spills straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
So when you're taking money from the oil and gas industry, it's because you're taking money to help America.
Yes, that's exactly it. This is your Green News Report.
Look, drill, baby, drill.
Okay, Desi Doyen, I've got so many snarky comments I could include here, including the fact that it hit 97 degrees yesterday. That's the last day in April out here in Los Angeles. It's that hot again today. It's going to be for the rest of the week. But you've got so many fossil-fueled explosions and spills. Never mind me. What do you have for us today?
Well, it was definitely a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week for fossil fuels, which were booming all over the U.S., and unlike the solar industry, not in a good way. First, a freight train carrying crude oil derailed and exploded in downtown Lynchburg, Virginia on Wednesday afternoon.
The CSX train was carrying at least a dozen tankers loaded with crude oil when it went off the rails, causing an explosion that sent a massive fireball and a plume of black smoke into the sky.
The oil tanker cars may have dumped up to 50,000 gallons of crude oil into the nearby James River, the primary water source for the city, and it also set the river itself on fire. Luckily, no deaths or injuries, but the massive fire forced evacuation of downtown, and officials say they're taking measures to protect the city's water supply.
When the Cuyahoga River in Ohio caught fire in 1969, it led to Richard Nixon forming the EPA. Maybe with the river on fire in Virginia, we'll finally be able to get rid of fossil fuels?
Not so fast. There is growing alarm, however, over the sudden increase in oil train explosions. That's prompted Canada to order an immediate phase-out of older model oil tanker cars. But in the U.S., the National Transportation and Safety Board warned last week that the U.S. is lagging behind in requiring safer and newer tanker cars.
And then the tanker cars exploded in Virginia.
Yeah, but that's not all. Within hours of the oil train explosion in Virginia, another fossil fuel train, this time carrying coal, derailed not too far away near Baltimore, Maryland. Initial reports suggest heavy rains may have washed out the track, and that dumped the coal cargo into nearby wetlands. But wait, there's even more. Out in western Texas, on the same day as the Lynchburg oil train explosion and the coal train spill in Maryland, a gas wellhead exploded and killed 2 workers and injured 9 others.
Well, at least that's the worst of it. I guess we're done now with those sorts of explosions and tragedies, for this week at least.
Nope, we're not. In western Florida, natural gas is believed to have been the cause of an explosion at a prison in Pensacola. That killed at least 2 inmates and injured more than 150 others and partially collapsed the building.
This jail had been flooded in those major storms that we told you about. More than 2 feet of rain here in this area.
That jail had been flooded in a freak rainstorm event that dumped nearly 2 feet of rain in 24 hours on Pensacola.
The scope of this disaster remains massive. More rain fell here than during Hurricane Ivan.
It was the same extreme storm system that spawned those deadly tornadoes in the southeast earlier in the week.
At least we know that 500-year storm in Pensacola has nothing to do with fossil fuel.
Funny you should mention that, because climate scientists predicted years ago that the emissions from burning fossil fuels would cause global warming that would bring more frequent and intense extreme weather events.
There you go, you and your facts again.
Finally, how about some good news?
Finally, how about some good news?
The world's largest solar plant is now up and running in Arizona. The Agua Caliente solar plant is now online, about the same capacity as a mid-sized natural gas plant, only this plant generates clean energy that is 100% explosion-free.
Wow, when you said it was a week from hell, you weren't kidding. For much more on the week from hell, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Please consider a donation there to help the Green News Report stay on the air so we can keep connecting the dots that very few others in the media seem willing to do. Download the Green News Report anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes, and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From BradBlog.com, ducking for cover, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
Green News Report.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We want the world and we want it now. We're gonna take it anyhow. We want the airwaves. We want the airwaves. That's right. We want the airwaves, baby. If rock is gonna stay alive.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. You know, I listened to the story by Ann there, and look, you know, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage for someone who's never been involved in any strike activity. I remember the first time I went on strike, and I remember going, wow, you know, this could last for, you know, who knows how long it's going to last, you know, monetarily, you know, how am I going to suffer? But understanding that fundamentally it was the right thing to do. We were protecting our conditions. We were protecting our jobs. We were protecting what generations had fought for. Now, look, when you sit down and you negotiate, you understand the realities of the situation. No one's going to ask for something that's unreasonable. And I guess it depends on who you ask to what's unreasonable. Is $13 an hour with some measure of health care and retirement security, is that too much to ask for? Now, there are some in the corporate class who say, yes, that's unreasonable. We can't possibly have that. Can't possibly have someone who's working in the dietary department to be making 13 or 15 bucks an hour with the ability to go to the hospital if they get sick and something at the end of the road. There are some who believe that that's unreasonable. I'm not one of those people, and I think most rational working people aren't those people. And when you look at it through that frame, where you start saying, look, sitting down, actually looking at the ability of the company to produce and to make, or whatever it is, whatever the profit margins are, the people who make that money should share in it, I think. If the CEO takes 125% raise and then demands that you take a pay cut, you got to ask yourself, where's that pay cut money going? It is nothing more than a theft, in my view. And there are those who keep pushing this idea that, well, we need to have less unions. We need to hamper their ability to organize. And today I saw over at Penn Live, Rick Berman, who is pretty much just a shill for the fast food industry, basically for anybody who will pay him. He's one of these big Wall Street, one of these Washington lobbyists, runs the Center for Union Facts, and his main gig there is trying to destroy unions. That's his gig. That's what he's paid to do by the big moneyed interests. So he had a hit piece over at Penn Live today talking about the UPMC campaign out in Pittsburgh that we've talked about on this program a number of times. And recently they had a hunger strike of workers and people from the community saying, hey, pay attention to us. And I thought it was very successful. It brought a lot of people in Pittsburgh together, grassroots organizing, something that he kind of mocks and says that isn't actually happening. He goes on to say that it's right from their corporate campaign playbook, because you got to put that in there. You got to, the unions are corporate, which I'm trying to figure out because I'm struggling. And he's pimping this piece of legislation, which is horrible. It is one of the worst piece of anti-worker garbage you will see. ERA. And what's funny to me is that they're tacking it on, because a lot of people, especially my age and a little bit older, when they hear ERA, they're thinking Equal Rights Amendment. Back in the 70s, there were a number of women who were pushing for equal rights. And how stupid is that? Why would we possibly want to have equal rights for people, right? But anyway, it's the Employee Rights Act that they're pimping, and he claims that 27 senators and 89 representatives, all of which are Republicans, have co-sponsored the quote-unquote reform legislation. Reform. Yeah. Basically what they want to do is they want to make it impossible for people to be able to organize. They want to make it impossible for workers, because understand, most organizing happens worker to worker. You're not going to have enough organizers to go to everybody's house. You may have someone who holds meetings, and this, I guess, shows what Berman doesn't know or is lying to you about and lying to me about. And look, there's the truth doesn't really matter, especially in this stuff, which is why I found it interesting that under Citizens United, he writes, I'm not making this up. You can check Penn Live, look at it yourself. Under Citizens United, unions are able to spend unlimited sums on independent expenditures, advertising not directly coordinated with campaigns from dues money. So what he's basically saying is all your dues money is being spent on that politics. And you're kind of pimping the idea that, they're spending all of this money, enormous amounts of money. They're just outspending everybody. They're drunken sailors spending. Except when you look at the reality. Union spending is paltry. I mean, it has been going down year after year because they're losing members. The attack is working. I mean, the right wing, and once they're gone, I mean, we're back to pre-depression levels of union density. We're almost to that point. But you hear the right-wing apologists. You hear the voice of the investor class, the Wall Street Journal, who put out a piece of just nonsense that said that unions spent more than the Koch brothers. She did this thing where they said that the union spent something like $620 million more than the Koch brothers and then Koch Industries did on political races. And when you look at the reality is the Koch brothers spent more money than the next 10 unions combined. In fact, the people over at the Republic Report, Lee Fang, who we've had on the program a number of times, he's pointed out that just the Koch brothers, just their spending was about $412 million. The top 10 unions, that would be AFSCME, that would be SEIU, that would be the NEA, IBW, AFL-CIO, which isn't really a union, just a conglomerate of unions, but the UAW, the Carpenters, the Teamsters, CWA, and UFCW, they combined, all of them, spent $153 million. Now, you're talking about two people. You're talking about the Koch brothers. Two people. They spent more than 10 unions of about 15 million people. To me, I think that's pretty important to think about. When you have two people who can outspend the collective ability of 15 million people, you have a serious distribution of wealth problem. And who could pay a shill like Berman? Well, I would guess the Koch brothers. And all of the money that they're putting out for shills like the Bermans of the world seems to be working. Quick break, right back with hour two.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better. It's the Rick Smith Show on Country Gold Radio, WIOO Carlisle, and WEEO Shippensburg.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The 288,000 U.S. jobs added in April was welcome news for workers. Accounting for upward revisions of the last 2 months of data, the U.S. economy has added an average of 234,000 jobs a month for 3 months. The AFL-CIO says it's a significant step in the right direction for working families, but there are miles to go before we sleep. The Labor Federation is urging congressional leaders to build on the good jobs news by passing comprehensive jobs legislation, extending unemployment insurance, and raising the minimum wage to help growth continue. The Center on Economic and Policy Research says that the drop in the national official jobless rate from 6.7 to 6.3% in April was entirely the result of 800,000 people leaving the labor force. Total employment, as measured by the Household Survey, actually dropped by 73,000 in April. Meanwhile, private sector wages and salaries in the first quarter of 2014 grew at the slowest rate ever since the Bureau began tracking that data in March of 1980. Leaders of New York City's Municipal Labor Committee have approved a multi-billion-dollar labor deal for teachers on a 20-2 vote. Voting starts today for the members of the 100 municipal unions that make up the committee. The city's deal with the United Federation of Teachers gives raises of 18% over 9 years with retroactive back pay to 2009. It could be a template applied to conclude labor contracts with other city unions. The deal depends on health care cost savings targets the unions must hit. The city's Health Stabilization Fund could be tapped to help with health benefits costs. With 500 supporters at the meeting, the 15 Now National Conference in Seattle voted Saturday to move ahead with a signature gathering campaign for a $15 an hour minimum wage to keep pressure on the Seattle City Council. The 15 Now Conference wants a backup plan in case the City Council fails to approve a real $15 an hour wage that covers all workers. International Association of Machinists Local 751 and IBEW Local 46 PAC are among the groups endorsing the ballot initiative. Seattle's mayor last week proposed a $15 an hour minimum wage indexed to inflation to be phased in over 3 to 5 years. IAM Local 751 Political Director Larry Brown said Boeing's approach to workers over the past years shows the need to build working-class solidarity in communities and to revive grassroots mobilization of working people. The Teamsters have won the first executive pay reform proposal to win a majority of shares cast at a publicly traded U.S. company's annual shareholders meeting. The proposal calls on Gannett to, quote, end the practice of accelerating the vesting of senior executives' equity awards in the event of a change in control, end quote. Ken Hall, Teamsters General Secretary Treasurer, says the union doesn't believe executives should get guaranteed windfalls from change of control situations. The union says compensation based on pay for performance is better in change of control situations. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Absence works. Maybe it's the way it's being taught or the way that it's being applied out there. But the fact of the matter is, it is the best form of to teach our children.
I wanna be a cowboy, and you can be my cowgirl. I wanna be a cowboy, and you can be my cowgirl.
Ah, yes, he wants to be a cowboy. Yeah. What a creepy dude that is. I gotta be honest with you. Well, abstinence works. Yeah, no kidding. It does work. Abstaining does. If you abstain, we must be teaching it wrong or applying it wrong. You're right. You're applying it wrong. It doesn't work in the real world. Yeah, you're right. That's the best way to not get pregnant, to not engage in it. Correct. You're right, Rick. Wow, you're a genius. You can't just walk down the street and get pregnant. Nope, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't fall out of the sky. Problem is we're talking about teenagers, and this is the problem with right-wing cranks like this, that you just they kind of lose their mind. And the other part that is this, I think we've talked about this, and I know Pat talked about this extensively. These purity balls. Have you seen this nonsense? Evidently in Los Angeles, the Metropolitan Police Department had sponsored one of these idiotic choose purity balls. One of their police officers who is pushing this Regina Coward, she said that, and you can't make this up. You really cannot. You can't make it up when someone says that, typically people who don't practice abstinence, and this is her words, they end up victims of sexual assault, or they become members of a gang, or they take drugs, or they become prostitutes. People who engage in normal human behavior. And you got to ask the question, because I think I would go out on a limb and say probably 90 to 95, maybe even 99% of people who get married today have engaged in some sort of premarital activity. At least I would hope they would. Look, I don't want my daughter being the town doorknob, but you know what? There's a natural progression that everyone should and will go through. This idea that you can strangle it, this idea that you can be ashamed of it, because if you do, it's the end. And you're most certainly going to get pregnant. I mean, you got to love the scare tactics in all of this. And it's really about demeaning women. These purity balls, you don't see a lot of guys going to the purity ball. And if they are, they're going to go, oh, well, let's see who I'm going to get a shot at. I just find it utterly ridiculous. Not something I would ever subject my kids to. Never, not even clinically. Would not do it under any way, shape, or form. Especially because I know that preaching abstinence doesn't work. Because the more you tell them not to, at least, and I'm speaking from personal experience, the more you tell me no, the more I go, yeah. If you're making a big deal about it, I need to know what it is. And I think a lot of people are that way. And now, I've been having these conversations going, hey, you got to be with my daughter because she's got to be ready for it mentally, physically, and financially. And these are realities that I don't think our society is even considering. Just no, like we did with drugs. Just say no. Well, just say no says, yeah. You got to be a little smarter about it. To me, anyway. I mean, education is the key to this. And you look at this new report out by the Guttmacher Institute. They claim that about 6% of females aged 15 to 18 became pregnant in 2010. That's down from 15% in 2008 and 2009, and that number has decreased 51% from its highest level in 1990. So you look at this and you go, education seems to work. And you know why? Well, according to the report, people are making smarter decisions. Older teens, those 18 and 19, they made up 69% of teen pregnancies. They claim that even that age group had a substantially lower rate of pregnancy, despite a higher proportion reporting that they have had activity. The report also says it is likely due to more effective means of contraception and actually using it right. So I look at this and I look at the party that keeps bringing us this. Now look, it's kind of like, talking earlier with John Hanger, who, I guess I'm not surprised that John has never smoked pot, and yet he can still advocate for it because it's a dumb policy to put people in jail for it. But it's about education. It's about reality. Same thing here. It's not that like I said, I don't want my daughter out running around. I don't want my son out running around. I think you have to be, emotionally, physically, and financially prepared for the consequences, and at least have an idea of how to keep yourself safe. Because look, the last report I read, a quarter of all teenagers have some form of sexually transmitted disease. So as you're looking at what's going on, and most of it, I guess, is the HPV, the human papillomavirus, which of course the right wing says we can't vaccinate against, and even that, it's the matter of when, in my view. But this head in the sand mentality, this head in the sand, don't deal with reality mentality of the right wing scares me a little bit. Doesn't it scare you? I mean, I look at these numbers and I go, okay, well, education seems to work, even in the face of all of the right wing insanity. And there have been numerous studies out that say abstinence-only education does not work. Browbeating people does not work. The purity ball thing, really not working. Not working at all. The pledge doesn't work either. Because understand, and I guess it's just because I remember being a teenager. I remember that time, and maybe these folks don't. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe they've been so detached from reality, or they've trained themselves to think otherwise, or that that only if they were different. That it's just odd to me. And as we move forward, as education continues to grow, the hope is that I still remember. And this is why I guess I'm so in favor of education. I remember high school health class where the guy who was teaching sex ed, and it was a one-day thing. This was not an ongoing. This was a very sterile, very cold, almost humiliating for him discussion, because the poor guy turned red head to toe. He had no idea how to convey, and this is why I don't know that the schools are the right place, and I wish parents would do it, because it's not just a one-time speech. It's actually a communicative thing. It's actually an ongoing thing. It's actually part of the upbringing process. Problem is like a lot of things. Parents leave it off. It ends up on the school, and the school goes, how do we deal with these problems? Because what was going on, especially back when I was a kid, or when my mother was a child, the schools weren't prepared to have children having children. They didn't have daycare centers like they do now, and good for them, they should. You just didn't finish high school, and then you had a life of misery. Then you had a life of poverty. I think about my own life. My mother was 16 when she got pregnant. It was a tough life. I don't wish that on anyone. And this idea of not communicating and not educating seems kind of dumb to me. Because why would we want to saddle anybody with that? And I hear people, oh, well, you know, you're here, she loved you, she did. That's not the question. Could it have been done 10 years later? If only a little education? You know, I get a lot of people, you know, giving me grief about my position on abortion. And look, I grew up Catholic. And the natural Catholic response is to be against the idea. Pro-life, of which, you know, if you're going to be pro-life, you got to be against the death penalty and war too. Sorry, just saying. But here's the thing. While being pro-life, I do also understand that people are in situations that they're not prepared. And I do think at a certain point, and this is one of those tough, really tough questions, that prior to, you know, the first couple of weeks, which is why I'm in favor of the Plan B, which is why I'm in favor of birth control, which is why I can't understand why conservatives aren't, because you then end that question of when does life begin. Some believe it begins the second you take your first breath. Some believe it begins at conception. I know other people who believe it begins at the beginning, before you get into conception. And they're insane. But you look at this, and for me, a lot of simple questions, a lot of very difficult answers can be answered with simple solutions. This being one of them. And you can tell I'm not comfortable with it, which is why I think the right uses it against people so much. It's that divisive issue that you then have to take the majority position. And simply put, you know, again, going back to that living in the real world. You know, my mother had told me a story of a girl she knew who went to Kentucky. Because back then, it was back, you know, when I was a kid, it was illegal. Roe versus Wade hadn't happened yet. It was illegal, except in Kentucky, where you could go find, you know, a backroom doctor who would do it, and there was more access. And she ended up getting an infection, not telling anybody, and by the end of it, she ended up dead. And it's, you know, it's one of those tales where unnecessary, completely and totally unnecessary. Just my thoughts on it. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
This Mother's Day, don't settle for the same old box of chocolates. Give Mom a gift she'll really appreciate. A gift that'll truly make a difference. Give her a heart necklace made by women who have survived actual war in South Sudan. These necklaces contain Swarovski crystals and are simply stunning. They come in all different colors and sizes, and best of all, they help fund a great cause. It's what Mom would want. To purchase your gift, visit goatsfortheoldgoat.com and click on Shop. Again, that's goatsfortheoldgoat.com/shop.
Hey there, fellow working class heroes. I have some great news. You can now get the Rick Smith Show podcast on your iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, or Palm on demand and on the go. Get your class war to go by downloading the Stitcher app on your smartphone by going to Stitcher.com and search for The Rick Smith Show, or go to our website at thericksmithshow.com and click on our Stitcher button. Together we can, and we will, rebuild a prosperous working class and leave opportunity for our children.
Today is a beginning. Frankly, this is a test for all of us.
Yes, this is a beginning. It's the 5th of May, 2014, and this is Luke Vargas for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. Buckle up. Let's recap the day's top global headlines in 2. It's been 3 weeks since the terrorist group Boko Haram kidnapped more than 200 schoolgirls in Nigeria. And over the weekend, President Goodluck Jonathan sounded a hopeful message, saying he had no intelligence they had been harmed.
Wherever these girls are, we'll surely get them out. There's no story that any of them has been hurt in terms of injured or death.
But despite these reassurances, there are growing concerns the girls could meet a very bad fate. Today, Boko Haram's leader, Abubakar Shekau, issued a video statement saying his group was responsible for the abduction and that the girls would soon be sold at the market, saying he was commanded by Allah to do so. Meanwhile, in South Sudan, after conflicting reports this morning, government forces loyal to President Salva Kiir appear to have retaken the small but strategic town of Bentiu. Since fighting broke out in South Sudan in December, control of the town has switched hands between the government and rebels nearly a half-dozen times. In addition to being an oil hub, Bentiu is also home to thousands of civilians who have fled into a nearby U.S.
Today is
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
Everybody's got a price. Everybody's gonna pay. Cause the $1 Million Man always gets his way.
Isn't that the absolute truth? The $1 Million Man always gets his way. And, you know, speaking of Rick Perry in the last segment with the abstinence only thing, which still drives me insane, he was on Meet the Depressed over the weekend. And you really can't make this stuff up. He said that what we need to be doing is we need to focus on the maximum wage rather than the minimum wage. And, you know, I got to be honest, I'm with him. I think we should be focusing on the maximum wage as well instead of the minimum. We should be raising the minimum wage as a matter of course. But this idea of a maximum wage seems reasonable to me, except that's not what he's talking about. He's basically saying, well, you know, to use his quote, I think it's an easy political line to pitch out and say, I'm for raising the minimum wage. He said, we're looking past that in Texas from the standpoint of how do we create the maximum wage available? How do we put more people into the workforce? He said that the policies that allow for job creation are pretty simple. It's tax policy, it's regulatory, it's a legal system that doesn't allow for oversuing. So let's break a little bit of that apart. Doesn't care about the people at the bottom of the economic scale. We already know that. We already know that the Mitt Romneys and the Rick Perrys and the Republican class, they don't care about the 47%. They have made that abundantly clear. They don't care about the unemployed, made that abundantly clear. And so what they do is they say, well, you know, if we raise the minimum wage, it'll make those workers dependent on minimum wage. I love the idea of pushing for it. We want people making the maximum wage. Okay, what is the maximum wage, Rick? Explain that to me. What's the maximum wage? There isn't one. So if you could make $1 trillion an hour, he thinks that's good. And I'm not against it, as long as it isn't you stealing from someone else. I don't mind you getting 125% raise, like the guy at Geisinger Lewiston Hospital. Don't mind it. Don't mind the CEO making a big buck, as long as the people who are actually creating the wealth are doing well too. I don't mind people making a ton of money, as long as they're not stealing it from the people, their underlings. You look at Papa John's, perfect example. Guy lives in a massive palatial estate, extraordinarily wealthy. And where's he getting the money from? Well, underpaying his drivers, underpaying the people who create the stuff, saying that I'm going to not hire full-time people because I'll have to provide them with health care. I mean, it's at some point, don't we have to look at these employers and these CEOs a little differently? Especially when you look at a place like Subway, who evidently, according to CNN Money, they looked at Labor Department records and they found that Subway, guilty of more than 17,000 separate Fair Labor Standard Act violations from over 1,100 separate investigations. Most of them come down to wage and hour violations, stealing from their workers, stealing the wages away from the people who make the money. I mean, who make them their product. And in fact, what they're saying, basically, in the fast food industry, wage theft is an epidemic. And I would argue that wage theft is an epidemic in places where workers don't have the power to stand up for themselves. Places like Subway. Places where you have a CEO who makes 1,000 times. You know, last year we talked about McDonald's, for instance, where their CEO made, in order to make what the guy cooking the burgers and the woman handing me the bag out the window and all of that, in order to make the same money, he'd have to work 1 million hours because he made $8.75 million. And evidently they claim the average wage for their employees is $8.75 an hour. 1 million hours. How many years would someone have to work to make 1 million hours? You figure the average year is about 2,000 hours. How many years? 500 years? 500 years to make what one guy makes in 1 year. It's obscene. And you've got these people like Perry. You've got these people who are steadfast against increasing the minimum wage. You've got people who are saying, oh, Seattle shot themselves in the foot. Seattle did a dumb thing because now we're going to see that minimum wage increases cost us jobs. Almost hoping for what's going on in Seattle to fail. Stop and think about the pathology that goes along with this. Stop and think about the mentality that goes, I hope that paying workers more money so that they can participate in the economy and support their family and not have to take tax dollars, hoping that fails is really very twisted in my view. The same thing with McConnell and Limbaugh and the rest of them. I hope Obama fails. We want Obamacare to fail. And I remember at the time saying, really? Did you just hear what these people said? They want the guy to fail. I never once, as much as I despised George W. Bush, as much as I despised the policies, never once said, I hope he fails. Because I know that if he fails, we're in for big trouble. Did I say his policies were stupid? Absolutely. Did I tell you they were going to fail? Uh-huh. But I never said once, I hope he fails. Never once. Those words never came out of my mouth. Yet we hear it all the time from the GOP. And to me, that's really very frustrating. Because the hope, in my view, is that we have a system where workers earn a decent living based on what they produce. You know, you love to hear the right wings, it's a meritocracy, Rick, don't you know? You earn what you're worth. No, that's not at all true. And what's interesting to me is you look at how well the wealth class of this country has done and how fast their wealth has grown. I mean, massive levels, enormous amounts of wealth being held in the hands of the very few. And you look at the Organization of Economic, the OECD, came out with some interesting numbers that I thought was very interesting. They looked at the world's developed nations, and they looked at their top income tax brackets. They say back in 1981, the average rate across all OECD countries averaged about 66%. Back in 1981. This is before Reagan went on the slashing tour. Our tax rate at the time was about 70%. Since then, the average top bracket, that top marginal tax rate in 2013 had dropped to 43%. And you go, wow, that's a pretty big drop. Here in the U.S., it dropped more than anywhere. They say it dropped by 19.3%, which, the more I'm looking at it went down from 70% in 1980. It's I guess right around 39% now. That's a bit more than 19.3%, which is what they're putting out. And they point to the UK countries the companies there and the CEOs and the wealth class there, a lower rate of decrease, all the way down to where the Netherlands had just a 6% decrease in their taxes. So basically what happened, and looking at this graph, what happened is the tax rates across the globe went down because the U.S. led the race. But no one beat the U.S. to the bottom. Because our tax rates have gone down a lot more than everyone else's. So then that's why you see this massive divide. And, to me, this is scary times. Because the more you see this economic divide going on, the more you see the gap between the haves and the have-nots grow, the more you see this expansion, the more troublesome it gets for me. And you look at new research out by Cornell University. They found that child abuse, child neglect, something that ran rampant within communities that had the bigger gaps between the very well-to-do and the very poor. And in fact, research just published in the Journal of Pediatrics. They looked at maltreatment of children in all of the counties here in the U.S. between 2005 and 2009. And surprise, it came down to two socioeconomic classes. The poor receive less support. They receive less services. Therefore, you have what you have. And is it surprising? I guess that's the question. Is anyone surprised? And I know what, wow, you can't throw money at the problem. Yeah, you can. And we should be. And we should be doing it by having a wage structure that rewards work and a tax structure that rewards community. Just my simple thought on it. Quick break, right back.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Month of May starts off with a fossil fuel bang.
And then it just went, whew. I mean, it was massive flames.
Oil train explodes in Virginia. Coal train spills in Maryland.
We have breaking news out of Pensacola, Florida this morning.
Natural gas explodes in Florida. More natural gas explodes in Texas.
Is almost a once-in-a-500-year event.
The scope of this disaster remains massive. Up to 2 feet of rain in 24 hours.
Record rains wash out Pensacola. Plus, the world's largest solar plant opens in Arizona. Explosion and spill free.
All of those explosions and spills straight ahead. From I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
So when you're taking money from the oil and gas industry, it's because you're taking money to help America.
Yes, that's exactly it. This is the News Report.
Look, drill, baby, drill.
Okay, Desi Doyen, I've got so many snarky comments I could include here, including the fact that it hit 97 degrees yesterday. That's the last day in April out here in Los Angeles. It's that hot again today. It's going to be for the rest of the week. But you've got so many fossil-fueled explosions and spills. Never mind me. What do you have for us today?
Well, it was definitely a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week for fossil fuels, which were booming all over the U.S., and unlike the solar industry, not in a good way. First, a freight train carrying crude oil derailed and exploded in downtown Lynchburg, Virginia on Wednesday afternoon.
The CSX train was carrying at least a dozen tankers loaded with crude oil when it went off the rails, causing an explosion that sent a massive fireball and a plume of black smoke into the sky.
The oil tanker cars may have dumped up to 50,000 gallons of crude oil into the nearby James River, the primary water source for the city, and it also set the river itself on fire. Luckily, no deaths or injuries, but the massive fire forced evacuation of downtown, and officials say they're taking measures to protect the city's water supply.
When the Cuyahoga River in Ohio caught fire in 1969, it led to Richard Nixon forming the EPA. Maybe with the river on fire in Virginia, we'll finally be able to get rid of fossil fuels?
Not so fast. There is growing alarm, however, over the sudden increase in oil train explosions. That's prompted Canada to order an immediate phase-out of older model oil tanker cars. But in the U.S., the National Transportation and Safety Board warned last week that the U.S. is lagging behind in requiring safer and newer tanker cars.
And then the tanker cars exploded in Virginia.
Yeah, but that's not all. Within hours of the oil train explosion in Virginia, another fossil fuel train, this time carrying coal, derailed not too far away near Baltimore, Maryland. Initial reports suggest heavy rains may have washed out the track, and that dumped the coal cargo into nearby wetlands. But wait, there's even more. Out in western Texas, on the same day as the Lynchburg oil train explosion and the coal train spill in Maryland, a gas wellhead exploded and killed 2 workers and injured 9 others.
Well, at least that's the worst of it. I guess we're done now with those sorts of explosions and tragedies, for this week at least.
Nope, we're not. In western Florida, natural gas is believed to have been the cause of an explosion at a prison in Pensacola. That killed at least 2 inmates and injured more than 150 others and partially collapsed the building.
This jail had been flooded in those major storms that we told you about, more than 2 feet of rain here in this area.
That jail had been flooded in a freak rainstorm event that dumped nearly 2 feet of rain in 24 hours on Pensacola.
The scope of this disaster remains massive. More rain fell here than during Hurricane Ivan.
It was the same extreme storm system that spawned those deadly tornadoes in the southeast earlier in the week.
At least we know that 500-year storm in Pensacola has nothing to do with fossil fuel.
Funny you should mention that, because climate scientists predicted years ago that the emissions from burning fossil fuels would cause global warming that would bring more frequent and intense extreme weather events.
There you go, you and your facts again.
Finally, how about some good news?
Finally, how about some good news?
The world's largest solar plant is now up and running in Arizona. The Agua Caliente solar plant is now online, about the same capacity as a mid-sized natural gas plant, only this plant generates clean energy that is 100% explosion-free.
Wow, when you said it was a week from hell, you weren't kidding. For much more on the week from hell, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Please consider a donation there to help the Green News Report stay on the air so we can keep connecting the dots that very few others in the media seem willing to do. Download the Green News Report anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes, and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From BradBlog.com, ducking for cover, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Green News Report.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend. Yeah, a lot of. Oh, he was mean. Oh, the jokes weren't funny. A lot of that nonsense. But it brought about a whole bunch of these celebrities hitting the talking head shows. And over the weekend on Meet the Depressed, will.i.am decided to join them, try to bring up, I guess, their ratings a little bit. They're to talk about his education foundation, which, got to be honest, I'm not thrilled with the whole idea of privatization and moving to more charters. But he actually hit on a couple of main important points. You know, why do we have this prison industrial complex? Why is it there's a pipeline from our schools to our prisons, especially if you're someone of color? And you know, he was absolutely right about the war on drugs. It has been nothing but a war that, one, we've lost. Well, not that we've lost. The profiteers, the prison industry, the prison industrial complex, they've won. He asked the question, you know, why are we paying prison guards more than we're paying teachers? He said maybe we should have a war on education the way we've had the war on drugs, and focus on kids 8 to 19. And I agree. Anyway, let's go to Washington, D.C. Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Bob, what's going on?
I was listening to your comments, and I thought it was very fascinating because these are very serious topics. I have a lot of inside knowledge on because I served time in prison, and I have to tell you, I mean, the president's on track. Unfortunately, a lot of people in D.C. really kind of don't want to stand up for those issues because they're not the, you know, sexy political issues that you really get a lot of points on.
There's a lot of money in it, too.
Well, yeah, and well, in the prison industries, we deemed it slave labor, and you know, they compete with the prison system is doing work, taxpayer funded, for the private sector in order to, you know, pay people a very low wage, and then the private sector gets a break. So it's all who, you know, has got the pull to get in there, and it's a system that doesn't do anything to rehabilitate a person. I just kind of wanted to add that since you had mentioned that topic. It's like I said, it's not a sexy topic, but it's a very important topic.
Oh, it's extremely important. And to me, it shows, and I think he hit on the fact that we're paying some prison guards more than you're paying teachers. That does show a misplaced priority. Look, not that prison guards should not be paid well. It's a dangerous job. I get that. But we should have, I think, in my view, more respect for teachers and pay them more as well.
Correct. And, you know, of course, a lot of things that make sense in Washington these days. Two of the issues, Rick, that are just, they're not, well, one will go away soon, one way or the other. That's the Keystone Pipeline. Speaking of that issue, you know, the Senate has a little bit of a problem on the Democratic side to decide maybe not so much the substance, Rick, but how to maneuver this thing. You have Senator Landrieu from Louisiana. She's a Democratic senator. These are, you know, states that are considered dangerous.
So says you.
So yeah, for the very conservative Democratic senator,
there you go.
And she's leading the charge for this Keystone Pipeline, and so now it's sitting out there. Now there's a filibuster there saying by quote the liberal side. You know, usually it's Rand Paul or Ted Cruz, but this time it's going to be the liberal side. And the question is, how will that filibuster end? Putting aside the substance of this issue, you know, the pipeline from Canada down to the Gulf, putting that aside for a second, there's the issue, because the Senate's up for grabs, of how they're going to maneuver through this. Will, in fact, the Democratic side trade with the Republicans, you know, don't you do any amendments and we'll allow you to have the Keystone Pipeline? So I think it's not going to be about substance. It's not going to be about right and wrong. It's going to be about how to get out of this and how to protect Senator Landrieu, because she feels she really, really, really needs this vote to get reelected.
And that may be true. And that may be true. And to be honest, I think I would rather have a bad Democrat named Landrieu than the insane Republican that's running against her. But that said, I still don't. No one has been able to explain to me how building this pipeline, beyond the short-term job creation, which I think we desperately need, how it's going to help lower energy costs. I just don't. I don't see that.
Well, it won't. It will have nothing to do with lowering energy costs. And when they say about the jobs, yes, there's some building trade jobs involved, et cetera, some skilled jobs. Those will be temporary. You know, they don't have 15,000 people that have to man that pipeline, but to build it. But as far as I don't know how anybody can justify that it will lower energy cost because it won't. It's you know, you've got China as a factor. All the other countries are using energy. A lot of this might, you know, be exported oil. But right now, and this issue will go away one way or another in about a week because the Senate has 1 week to maneuver.
Right.
The other issue with Benghazi has now boiled down to, and this was after a comment by one congressman on the Sunday talk shows, Congressman Schiff, who had said, well, you know, we may just not participate, meaning the Democratic side, in the Benghazi hearings. And there is an internal debate, Rick, I was told by friends on Capitol Hill today, of, you know, whether the Democratic side should just say, look, this is a farce, it's a joke, we're not going to give this any credibility, we're simply not going, or do they need to go and do political combat? I mean, that's a debated decision that they're wrangling over now internally.
I think you have to be at least in the frame when they put this stuff out. You have to be standing there going, "This is a farce." You can't, if you're not in the room. How can you know it's a farce? If you're just saying the whole thing's ridiculous and half done and half baked, but you're not in the room. I don't know how people. Okay, fine, yeah, it's a farce, and then you hear every night something else coming out that you really can't rebut because you weren't there.
Well, you know, when Bush was president, there was a conference, I think it was on race relations, and it was hosted, you know, Cuba was the official host. As a result of that, of course, it was boycotted. Several members of Congress went anyway because they said, you know, just because you don't like who's doing the event doesn't mean you don't go add your voice. If they don't go, you know, you can't debate things. And I think you're right. They have to, on this one, I would assume, and I'm going to guess in my gut, that they will attend and will, you know, step up to the table to debate it, you know, line by line, which for some people is, you know, going to be the fourth and fifth time. But on the Republican strategy side, too, and really, let's make this really clear, Congressman Issa of California did a lot of missteps, to, you know, squelch vote, speaking. You know, you don't do that to minority members, you know, from the Democratic side. You just don't do it. He had a lot of missteps, thought he had things, made statements that weren't, you know, accurate or true at all. And now, you know, he's not running this show, and they're trying to make up for mistakes that he made that really were, you know, it was a nightmare. So he's not running the show this time. They've got somebody else. So it's a new strategy. But we'll see what the Democratic side decides about participating.
Let me ask you this, because, you know, someone had asked me after our last conversation if this is just a ploy to pull it away from Issa, to get him off of center stage and, you know, you send him off stage left. You know, could that be, or do you really think that there's something here that's a mess?
I think there's two things. One, the fact that these emails weren't given before just raised a lot of, you know, suspicion and people were clamoring about it. The second thing is, and I'm not a black helicopter conspiracy theorist, Rick, but something tells me, just in my heart of hearts, and, you know, with some of the rumor mill, but, you know, there's some additional information, not something that somebody intentionally did something, but maybe some other information got held, and as a result of that, they think they've got a semi-smoking gun. But there is no question about it. The reason there is a select committee, and there is only but one reason, is to take it out of the hands of Congressman Issa. That is why they did it, because they know even if he had 5 additional hidden emails, he'd find a way to make it a train wreck.
Yeah, and that's what this person was telling me, that was their thought, that it was just to get it away from Issa and also to hang it on Hillary, which I've seen a couple, you know, when we talked, you said there's almost no way to bring this back to her, but I had a couple people go, wow, we're going to get Hillary on the stand and she's going to plead the fifth. I'm going, I don't think so.
No, I cannot imagine. No, Hillary Clinton, I'm with you, will not plead the fifth. If she goes in there, she's not going to. I frankly don't see where the Republicans would make the move to bring her in. She could eat them alive for lunch. I just don't see it. I think they're going to bring Kerry in and others. They would have to be very, very delicate how they would handle it with Hillary Clinton. Very delicate.
Let me ask you, why haven't we heard more about the underfunding? I mean, I read an article, it was a while ago, Dana Milbanks put it out, I guess back in 2012, of when, where was the money? I mean, all of this money that's been lost in this because of sequester, because of other cuts. Why none of that?
Well, everything is going off the front pages here. It's all about emails withheld. It's about Benghazi. I mean, everything, and nobody's even talking about. You've got the issue about funding of security for embassies, et cetera. But you've got the whole budget right now that's milling around and rolling around, and nobody's even talking about it. I mean, everything's off the front page for this Benghazi, and maybe that's by design.
I was going to ask you that. Is this the shiny thing that takes our mind off of everything else? Because there's some things in the Obama budget I'm not thrilled with. This transportation budget as well, putting toll booths everywhere. I'm really not in favor of that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about the last a couple of times, especially George Bush's last presidency. But the transportation bills were always previously a kumbaya, wonderful bills. You're seriously returning taxpayers' dollars through the gas tax. You really are, that they're assessed back to the states for wonderful projects. And all of a sudden, they've just found ways to, I don't know, mess up a good thing. These were pretty standard funding practices. And now when you start to talk about tolls, I mean, poor people might as well just stay home for the summer, or if they have to go to work.
Yeah, and the other part of it that I don't like is that, that privacy thing. I don't want people knowing where I'm going. Every time you turn around, there's an Easy Pass thing over your head, and that's going to get worse. They're just going to start putting them in cars. You won't even have a choice. You'll sign up, and this is your Easy Pass number. Oh, we've got your check. We've got your checking account and your credit card. Wherever you go, ching, 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 ching. And not only the money, it's the tracking. I'm not in favor of it at all.
Well, I mean, I sound like an old guy that I am, but it's not just being older and suspicious of the electronic age. This is an age where everything is becoming, your very movements of an average citizen for no reason are tracked. And this is just another way to do it.
Yeah, I'm just, where we're heading, you see it coming. I mean, you see this slow-moving train wreck coming, and I'm not thrilled with it. And to me, the whole idea of we should have been raising the gas tax 15 years ago.
Correct.
Oh, well, it is what it is. Bob, always great talking with you. Appreciate the
sir.
time. Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
They're back. They're rested. They're ready. Our Congress critters, that is. They've returned to their workplace after enjoying a badly needed 2-week Easter vacation. After all, it had been a full 4 weeks since their last vacation in March. And meanwhile, they'd been doing a lot of heavy lifting. Passing a jobs bill, raising the minimum wage, and extending long-term unemployment benefits for millions of desperate folks who've been unable to find jobs. Yes, sirree, our legislative leaders have been working like mules to strengthen America's hard-hit middle class. Oh, wait, my mistake. They haven't passed any of that stuff. In fact, the GOP House, along with the Republicans in the Senate, have been working overtime to kill any bills to lift up America's workaday families. Still, as you might imagine, killing bills can plumb tucker you out. So those lawmakers, or in this case, law killers, literally needed a break. Sure enough, now that they're back at the congressional grindstone, they seem full of pep, ready to say no again and again. Only a week after returning, for example, Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell rose up on his hind legs, mustered a burst of negative energy, and zapped dead a Democratic proposal to hike America's minimum wage. As a result of Mitch's legislative labor of love, Millions of hardworking people will remain stuck in poverty-wage jobs for the foreseeable future. Who benefits from such a Dickensian effort? McDonald's, Domino's Pizza, Taco Bell, and other multi-billion-dollar giants that profit by holding down their own workers. This is Jim Hightower saying the widening chasm of income inequality in our land of opportunity is no accident. It exists, and it grows worse by political design. Americans would be better off if those designing lawmakers just stayed on vacation.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Podcast, all of that stuff, website, Stitcher, smartphone, all that. Very simple, very easy, right there for your convenience. Very soon, coming up with our new app will be out. So you can just have the Rick Smith Show app right on your phone. Play it anytime you want from anywhere where you are. Looking forward to that as my tech guru Arnold is diligently working to hammer that out. In fact, I got a call this morning, and this woman was just it's one of those things where I was half asleep when she called, so honestly I thought it was somebody trying to sell me something. It was like a telemarketer because she talks so fast. Did you put in an application for Android, iPhones, iPads, And I go, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, if you could talk slower and explain it to me, maybe I could figure it out. It made me sound really stupid. And then she finally said app, and I go, and she said the name of the company. I go, oh, I know what you're talking about now. Why did you say that to begin with? And yes, soon the app will be out, so that you'll be able to just wherever. It's always going to be there. That I'm looking forward to. Something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and finally, we here at the program decided it's important, and we're going to do it. Good news, I guess, for the people who like to know what's in their food. Did you know if you drank like Gatorade or Powerade that there was a chemical in it, this brominate vegetable oil, which evidently was initially marketed as a flame retardant agent, a flame retardant agency. What kind of idiot would say that? And I don't know that I'm thrilled with the idea of drinking something that was supposed to make things flame retardant. But now I won't have to, thanks to a 15-year-old girl, Sarah Kavanaugh. She wanted the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to crack down on the use of chemicals in sports drinks because, hey, athletes supposedly are really conscious about what goes into their body. And, maybe you could market it as, well, you won't spontaneously combust. You drink our drink, you are flame retardant. Maybe that's something else. But anyway, Pepsi had originally, about a month ago, I guess, had said that they were going to remove the BVO from their Gatorade, and Coke has now followed with Powerade saying that they are BVO free. Yeah, I got to be honest. You got to wonder what's in our stuff, and this is another reason why I keep saying we need to have better labeling and actually know what's in our stuff. And maybe not so smallly printed that you need magnifying glass to see. Just a thought. A couple of quick things to wrap up before we wrap tonight up. Ron sent me an email, asked me if I hadn't heard, he was going to point it out, that Roy Moore, you remember Roy Moore, right? The guy with the giant 10 Commandments. He said Roy Moore, Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice, former, I'll add to that, and all-around whack job, said in a recent speech that the freedom of religion in the Constitution only means Christianity. All other religions don't meet the definition of religion put forth by the Supreme Court of the United States and founding documents. I don't know that to be accurate. Sorry. And if that's what he believes, and I'm sure it is what he believes, I'm going to argue he's wrong. I don't remember the word God or Christian being in the Constitution, because it is the godless Constitution. It just says, and I'm just a layman's reading of it, or interpretation, if you will, that it established no religion. And I would have to argue, and I would guess that whatever it is that your belief structure is, whatever organization that you belong to, I guess that's you. And yeah, so founding documents, it's interesting that pops up. I think about I think it was the Treaty of Trinidad, where George Washington wrote in a treaty that said we are not a Christian nation. Seem to remember that not a Christian nation thing, that we have no problem with Muslim folk. I got to be honest, I don't think many of our Republicans have actually read that document. Just a thought. Anyway, in the coming days, we're going to be talking to more gubernatorial candidates. We're going to get to the bottom of this by May 20th. We're going to figure out who it is going to be the guy running against and beating Tom Corbett. Have a great night. See you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime. Smith